Chapter 266. Can they be planted with this? Qin Wanru looked at the small bag of flower seeds in her hand and felt that it was mysterious enough. Miss, now many people in the capital city are inviting some experienced gardeners into their mansions. The purpose is to accompany the Tang Qianyan this time. Miss, do you think you should also invite one? If you are late, I'm afraid that all the good gardeners will be invited. Nanny Yu reminded her. On the way back, she heard that several gardeners who were good at taking care of flowers and plants had been hired. No need. Qin Wanru thought for a while and shook her head. Why not? Miss, although there are servants in our mansion who take care of flowers and plants, they are not so good at it. Especially for flowers and plants like the Tang Qianyan, which are very delicate. We have to find someone to take care of it. Nanny Yu frowned with worry. After returning to the mansion, Nanny Yu specially investigated and found that the gardeners in the mansion had no knowledge of Tang Qianyan at all. They only knew how to take care of ordinary flowers and plants. It takes a long time for the flowers to grow seeds and bloom. There must be many people who can't take care of them well. Qin Wanru said. She had no clue at all, and she didn't want to stand out in this kind of order issued by the palace. She didn't know which noble in the palace gave the order. The one who could mobilize the forces of various aristocratic families was either the Empress Dowager or the Empress. Others did not have such great power. So what was the purpose of planting the Tang Qianyan? Did it really need such a great power to plant flowers and plants? Qin Wanru subconsciously felt that it was not simple. She kept a respectful distance from this kind of thing and did not want to stand out. It was safe to be the same as most of the young ladies who didn't grow well or didn't plant well. Before figuring out the truth of the matter, she would not make any rash moves. The best way was to blend in with the crowd. Even if most people don't take care of them well, there are always a few who are excellent. Nanny Yu did not understand the other meaning in Qin Wanru's words. The meaning of the word was only explained according to the literal meaning. Will the excellent ones be like this? Qin Wanru was still smiling with her watery eyes leisurely. Nanny Yu was stunned by this question. After a long while, she said, I don't know, but I think the palace will reward them. The palace will not reward for no reason, and they have spent so much manpower and material resources. If it is not for the big request, they will not disturb so many unmarried misses from aristocratic families, and they are all unmarried. Qin Wanru said meaningfully. Being reminded by Qin Wanru, Nanny Yu was shocked and her face changed immediately. She unconsciously lowered her voice and asked hesitantly, to choose concubines for the princes. Prince Yu and the other princes have not chosen concubines. This time, they are all unmarried young ladies from aristocratic families who are not engaged, are selected by the palace. This is the palace's decree. It should be for these princes. Nanny Yu, Chu Luiwei and the others were young, but they had to observe for a period of time to choose concubines. It was very possible to take the seed of Tang Qianyan as part of the concubine selection. Qin believed that was not only Wanru, but also the Qin v Wanru. Shi Wan. 1, 1, 1 and 1 1. Her words made Nanny Yu exclaim in a low voice. She was a little flustered. Let's leave it at that. We'll plant the flowers ourselves. It'll be great if we can grow them. If we can't, there's nothing we can do. After planting them, we'll put them at my window and I'll take care of them. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Miss, will you plant them yourself? Nanny Yu looked at the pot of Tang Qianyan at the window and was not confident. It doesn't matter as long as I do my best. Qin Wanru said without any burden. Then, Miss, what about this invitation? Since Qin Wanru had made up her mind, Nanny Yu could only follow her wishes and turn to look at the invitation. Along with Tang Qianyan, there was also a big red invitation card. It was an invitation from the palace. The Empress had personally invited these young ladies of aristocratic families who had received the seeds to attend a flower viewing party in the palace. The prize was this Tang Qianyan. Most of the Tang Qianyan that bloomed in autumn would also bloom in winter, but there were many of them and they were more precious. Of course, we have to attend the invitation from the palace. Did Qin Yu get one? Qin Wanru picked up the exquisite invitation and asked. First, Miss doesn't have one because she's engaged. Even if she's not engaged, it's impossible for her to get one. I heard that the young ladies who got the invitation this time are all of good character. Nan Yu said. Right now, the most talked about thing in the capital was the seed of Bao Tang Qianyan and the invitation from the palace. This result was expected. Qin Yuru's reputation was not just a little bit bad now. This also made Nanny Yu more and more sure that this matter had something to do with the selection of concubines for the princes. Although the eldest prince, Prince Yu Chuluiwe, was not very old, how could the marriage of the royal family be simple? It was normal for them to choose their concubines slowly. In Ningyuan Army General's mansion, only Qin Wanru was going to attend the banquet. In the next few days, Madame Dowager was even more attentive. She and Shui Rulin rushed to make a few more sets of clothes for Qin Wanru. On this day, Qin Wanru was also driven out of the mansion by Madame Dowager to pick some suitable jewelry. Madame Dowager said that the original style of jewelry was a little old-fashioned and asked her to pick some more suitable ones. The carriage went out of the mansion and turned to the bustling streets of the capital city. The curtain was lifted, but the gauze curtain was down. Qin Wanru sat by the window and looked out of the window. When the carriage turned a few streets, she pointed to a big gold jewelry shop outside and nodded. Stop the carriage. Let's go to this shop. Yu Jia immediately raised her voice and said to the coachman. The coachman took the order and stopped the carriage in the alley beside the door. Yu Jia put on the curtain hat for Qin Wanru and helped her get off the carriage. The two of them walked into the shop one after the other. Just from its appearance, one could tell that this shop was extraordinary. It was a large shop with 3 bays and 3 floors. Just by standing at the door, one could tell that the people who came to this shop were either rich or respectable. The door was very lively. From time to time, one could see some well-dressed misses and madams of aristocratic families entering the shop. The business was very good. Qin Wanru entered the door with Yu Jia and first walked around downstairs. There were many people downstairs. Many women were choosing, and several places were surrounded by a lot of people. Qin Wanru walked around and didn't find anything particularly suitable, so she took Yu Jia to the second floor. Compared with downstairs, the second floor was more exquisite. Near the window, there were private seats separated by screens. You could sit there and wait for people or enjoy the scenery. Some men who accompanied her sat in the private seats and chatted, so they didn't feel bored waiting. Qin Wanru came up, looked at the upper floor, and walked to the counter in the middle. There were also several misses around. Obviously, they knew each other, and a large group of servant girls served them. Looking at the sets of exquisite jewelry they were choosing, Qin Wanru calmly stepped back to the side. Those pieces of jewelry were obviously expensive. Although her grandmother had given her money, Qin Wanru thought it was unnecessary to spend so much money to buy them. She also wanted to save a sum of money to invest in her shop so that she could have more flexible cash flow in the future. Thinking of this, she didn't go to the crowd, but turned to the side. The sets of golden headgear and necklaces were very exquisite on the counter. Finally, Qin Wanru stood in front of a cabinet, pointed to a hairpin inside, and said, "Can you show me this hairpin?" "Okay, miss, please wait a moment." The shop assistant answered very cleverly, and carefully took out the hairpin that Qin Wanru liked from inside. The hairpin was very exquisite and beautiful. The flower shape on it was the shape of a Tang Qianyan. It was not very big, but when the petals were stretched out, the stamens were dotted, which was very vivid, just like a real blooming Tang Qianyan. There were also a few beads on one end of the hairpin, which fell from the stamens and made the stamens more delicate and shiny. Although it didn't look so eye-catching at first glance, it was very beautiful and exquisite when looked at carefully. It seemed to be better than the hairpins of the previous shopkeeper. He also spent a lot of effort on the thin stamens. Each stamen was different, but each had its own charm. He described the difference between the stamens and petals with golden ornaments. Qin Wanru liked it very much at first sight. Seeing the shop assistant take it out, she was about to reach out to take it, but it was snatched by a hand from the side. She turned her head in astonishment and saw a woman standing beside her, looking at the hairpin she snatched from Qin Wanru with a look of surprise. "Third cousin, look, doesn't this hairpin look like the flower of the Tang Qianyan in your window?" The woman held the hairpin to show it to the man beside her. Qin Wanru's eyes turned to the man beside her, and she couldn't help sighing in her heart. Life was really full of surprises. She had tried her best to see Wen Shiqi before, and wanted to remind him that his cousin was not a good person, so that he should be careful. When they met in Huaguang Temple, she also knew from Wen Shiqi's words that he should have investigated this cousin, but at that time he had doubts about her. In order to avoid misunderstanding, Qin Wanru didn't want to see Wen Shiqi now. She really didn't have any other thoughts about him, and just wanted to repay his kindness in the last life. However, when she wanted to see him, she couldn't see him no matter how hard she tried. When she didn't want to see him, she actually met him on the way. She had to admit that this kind of thing was really hard to describe. He looked at Gu Shishu, who was standing beside Wen Shiqi. This was his cousin, the cousin Miss who had been raised in the Prime Minister's mansion. After he entered the Prime Minister's mansion, this cousin Miss had plotted against him many times. After being reborn, she didn't expect to meet her again at this time. Miss, this hairpin was chosen by our Miss first. How can you snatch it from our Miss? Yujia stepped forward, pointed at the hairpin in Gu Shishu's hand, and said loudly. Chapter 267. You haven't bought it yet. How can you say it belongs to your Miss? Seeing that her Miss was in a weak position, a servant girl standing behind Gu Shishu stood up and glared at Qin Wanru and Yujia, as if they were the ones who had been robbed of the hairpin. Qin Wanru withdrew her eyes from Wen Shiqi's face and looked at Gu Shishu's face. She saw her arched eyebrows slightly frowning and her eyes slightly red, as if she had been greatly wronged. Qin Wanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and her eyes were calm and deep. Miss, I saw this hairpin first and asked the waiter to take it out. Can you let me see it first? Qin Wanru saw it first and asked the waiter to take it out. In this case, since Qin Wanru liked it, other customers were not allowed to rob it before Qin Wanru gave it up. Wen Shiqi's eyes turned from Qin Wanru to Yujia. He didn't recognize Qin Wanru, who was wearing a veil hat at first, but when she spoke just now, he immediately recognized her. When he saw Yujia clearly, he was more certain that the person in front of him was Qin Wanru. Cousin, give the hairpin back to this miss. Wen Shiqi said gently. Cousin, I didn't rob her hairpin. Hearing that Wen Shiqi didn't help her but vaguely admitted the crime for her, Gu Shishu was about to cry. She lowered her head and wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, looking more pitiful. Although they made a small noise, they still attracted the attention of the people around them, especially the word rob. Ladies from aristocratic families paid most attention to their dignity, so they couldn't rob. Miss, can you give me back the hairpin in your hand? I'm going to pay for it. Qin Wanru ignored Gu Shishu's pitiful look and said naturally. Her watery eyes fell on Gu Shishu coldly. This was not the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion in the last life, and there were no Deputy Prime Minister and madams who were extremely partial to Gu Shishu. Gu Shishu's tricks in the last life didn't work here at all. Moreover, Wen Shiqi beside her was not the Wen Shiqi who was blinded by family affection in the last life. Although they didn't say a word to each other, Qin Wanru could still clearly hear the alienation in Wen Shiqi's words. It seemed that her warning really worked. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a smile under his veil hat. Miss, can you give me the hairpin? I'll pay you double the price. This hairpin is my cousin's favorite Tang Chenyan. Seeing that Qin Wanru was unmoved and that Wen Shiqi had no intention to stand up for her, Gu Shishu had to hold back the tears in her eyes, timidly raised the hairpin and pleaded. It seemed that the reason why she wanted this hairpin was entirely because of Wen Shiqi. On the one hand, it also pointed out that the relationship between them was unusual. A gentleman should help others achieve their goals. If he was a gentleman, he should give up the hairpin at this time. Even if she wasn't very willing, she would still express her blessings and compromise in front of everyone. She had to show the gentleness and kindness of a young lady from an aristocratic family. Especially at this time, everyone guessed that it might have something to do with those princes. If there was such a chance to show their gentleness and kindness, many ladies present would be willing to give up a hairpin to promote their reputation. But she met Qin Wanru today. I'm really sorry. My mother also likes Tang Chenyan's hairpin. I like this hairpin first. Please give it back to me, miss. Qin Wanru bowed sideways, then raised her body and said lightly. Although the relationship between cousins could also be considered as kinship, it seemed a bit ambiguous and not very presentable when it came to the hairpin. However, Qin Wanru's words about her mother were about filial piety. Compared with this kind of ambiguous meaning, it seemed more generous and decent. With such a sentence, Gu Shishu had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. Many ladies present were also reminded by Qin Wanru's words. They covered their mouths with handkerchiefs and looked at Gu Shishu with a bit of sarcasm. Those who knew when Shichi looked at Gu Shishu with more and more scornful eyes. Wasn't this the cousin who was raised in Deputy Prime Minister's mansion? It was said that this lady seemed to admire Third Young Master Wen. But the goddess liked him, but Prince Xiang didn't. Third Young Master Wen obviously stood on the side with the mentality of a bystander. He didn't say a word for Gu Shishu, nor did he mean to defend her. Third cousin. Gu Shishu didn't expect Qin Wanru to be so difficult to deal with. She turned her head, looked at Wen Shichi sadly, and held the hairpin tightly in her hand. She was not willing to let go of this hairpin. What she liked was hers. Cousin, give the hairpin back to this lady. This lady bought it for my mother. It's not good for you to take someone else's hairpin. When Shichi finally opened his mouth under Gu Shishu's expectant eyes. But he didn't mean to stand on Gu Shishu's side at all. With one sentence, he settled the dispute between them. He meant that Gu Shishu was rude and made trouble and robbed Qin Wanru's hairpin. In Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, Gu Shishu had always been the best at using means to get the attention of people in the mansion, and also to make people yield to her in everything. She didn't expect that when Shichi would help an outsider for a hairpin today. She was ashamed and angry at the moment, and her face turned blue and white. Looking at the sarcastic eyes of the people around her, she couldn't hold back the tears in her eyes anymore. Suddenly, she threw the hairpin in her hand fiercely, turned to cover her face and cried. Miss, miss. Her servant girl hurriedly chased after her. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the hairpin that fell to the ground, and her eyes were dark. The delicate flower on the hairpin on the ground had been broken. Gu Shishu was such a person. If she couldn't get what she liked, she would rather destroy it than give it to others. In the last life, when Shichi was destroyed by her in the same way. Seeing that the hairpin was broken, the shop assistant was so scared that his face turned pale. He hurried out to pick up the hairpin and the broken one on the ground, looked at Qin Wanru with a sad face and said, Miss, you see, as a small shop assistant he couldn't afford such a hairpin. This hairpin belongs to me. Of course, Qin Wanru understood this and said. But her words were gently interrupted by Wen Shichi, this hairpin belongs to me. It was my cousin who was not sensible and snatched your hairpin. Because she failed to snatch it, she was angry and broke the hairpin. This responsibility was originally Gu Shishu's, and Wen Shichi didn't intend to cover it up for her. In the past, he didn't care about it and only regarded her as a young cousin. Since his younger sister died, he treated her as his younger sister. Besides, they grew up together, so he didn't have much wariness about her. Who would have thought that this would actually nourish her ambition? She wanted to hook up with second brother and Wen Shichi. She really wanted to control her brother in the palm of her hand. After knowing this, Wen Shichi and Gu Shishu only maintained a superficial affinity. At this time, of course, he would not go out to chase after her as she wanted, nor would he push the blame to Qin Wanru. Originally, he had regarded her as a cousin who grew up with him and sincerely protected her, but now, he would not be polite. How can I do that? Since I saw this hairpin, it belongs to me. Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Wen Shichi and said lightly. Her words were very alienated, as if she wanted to distance herself from Wen Shichi. In this case, miss, choose another hairpin. If you like it, I will pay for it to compensate for the loss of this hairpin. Seeing Qin Wanru refuse, Wen Shichi had to say, Thank you, young master. Thank you, young master. It's just that it's not proper for young master to pay for it, not to mention that it's something used by women. I appreciate young master's kindness, but I'd better go and see young master's cousin. It seems that she's very angry. Don't get angry with young master. Qin Wanru continued to refuse calmly. Her words were very polite and alienated, as if she didn't want to have anything to do with him. Even if when Shichi wanted to say something, he couldn't go on at this time. He could only helplessly cup his hands to Qin Wanru, and after a sigh, he turned to chase in the direction where Gu Shishu just left. The whole thing didn't happen for a long time, but there were many sounds of Gu Shishu smashing the hairpin in anger. Many misses and madams from aristocratic families turned to this side. When they saw Shichi leave, some familiar ones began to whisper. Is he the third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion? Yes, he is the third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. I heard that he is likely to pass the exam in spring. That's the cousin of their family? Didn't Madam of the Deputy Prime Minister say that this niece is good and very gentle? This kind of domineering behavior is really... This cousin Miss must have taken a fancy to third young master when... She doesn't know who she is. When Shichi was also a famous young master from a famous family in the capital city. He was good-looking, so many misses liked him. However, he had always been polite to women and didn't want to get close to them. So some misses who knew him just now didn't dare to come up and talk to him. But now that they left, they all spoke of this cousin Miss with disdain. Moreover, she despised Gu Shishu openly. Although they might not have seen the whole scene of Gu Shishu's behavior just now, from the conversation between Shichi and Qin Wanru, they could understand that Miss Gu's behavior was really unacceptable. Even so, Madame of the Deputy Prime Minister kept praising her, which made some misses who had taken a fancy to Shichi jealous and hateful. Of course, they wouldn't let go of such an opportunity to ridicule her. They even thought of telling their elders when they went back. Next time Madame of the Deputy Prime Minister praised this niece, they could mention what happened today. They wanted to see if Madame of the Deputy Prime Minister would continue to praise this niece. She was just a foster girl, but she dared to have designs on third young Master Wen, who was favored by many aristocratic families in the capital city. In this way, there were many misses who didn't like her. In the past, they didn't find her fault, but now they found that she was completely different from the rumors, so they all talked about her with disdain. While they were talking, the shop assistant breathed a sigh of relief. He nodded and bowed gratefully. He was about to wrap up the broken hairpin and introduce other accessories to Qin Wanru with enthusiasm. He was afraid that Qin Wanru would be dissatisfied. Chapter 268. Qin Wanru turned to look at the owner of this hand. When she saw clearly who it was, she had to sigh that it was an unlucky year. How could she meet so many acquaintances today? This person was not someone to be trifled with. The fourth prince, Prince Exen, Chu Liuxin, did not have a good impression of her when he was in Great Elder Princess's mansion. She was afraid that Xiao Yuanhao's matter was triggered because of him, which made him feel ashamed and then blame her. This hairpin is good. I want it. Chu Liuxin grabbed the hairpin and looked at Qin Wanru provocatively. He also recognized Qin Wanru because he saw Yu Jie. When he came in just now, when Shichi happened to go out, so he did not see the whole scene. But after he recognized Qin Wanru, he did not intend to let Qin Wanru marry him, so he immediately grabbed the hairpin. Your Highness, do you want a broken hairpin? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and helplessly looked at Chu Liuxin, who was obviously looking for trouble. So what if I like it? Can't I? Chu Liuxin said arrogantly. As long as you like it. Qin Wanru speechlessly looked at the broken hairpin in his hand and said slowly after a while. Come on, Pei. Seeing that Qin Wanru did not dare to compete with him, Chu Liuxin felt very proud and exalted. He also felt that Qin Wanru was a little more pleasing to the eye. The little eunuch behind him hurried over and carefully reached out to take it. He stole a glance at his master and did not understand why his master was so happy to grab a broken hairpin. But no matter what, the master was the most important, as long as the master was happy. He reached into his arms and took out the banknote to pay the bill. After seeing the little eunuch pay the bill, Qin Wanru said with a smile, "That miss will thank you, Your Highness. I didn't expect that her broken hairpin could make Your Highness so happy." The complacency on Chu Liuxin's face suddenly disappeared. He looked at the hairpin in the little eunuch's hand and then looked at Qin Wanru with a little anger on his face. He just thought that the hairpin was Qin Wanru's. Even if it was broken, he still wanted to make Qin Wanru lose face. This was the evidence that Qin Wanru had lost the dignity of a miss from an aristocratic family. A miss from an aristocratic family like her should be dignified and decent wherever she went. She should not break her hairpin. Whose lousy hairpin is this? Chu Liuxin said angrily. I don't know who it is either. I don't know the young lady just now. Qin Wanru bowed sideways and said goodbye. She didn't want to accompany Prince Xin, who came with bad intentions. Since your highness likes this hairpin, it's great that the shop can avoid a loss. After that, without looking at the angry Chu Liuxin, he turned around and walked out with Yu Jie. In public, Chu Liuxin could not really stop Qin Wanru. He could only stare at Qin Wanru's back with hatred, only thinking that this girl was more and more hateful. Your highness, do you still want to take a look? The little eunuch said carefully. They entered this shop to choose a suitable birthday gift for Chu Liuxin's biological mother, concubine Ming. What are you looking at? I'm not looking anymore. Let's go. Chu Liuxin said angrily. He looked at Qin Wanru's back angrily with a pair of handsome eyes, only feeling that Qin Wanru was becoming more and more annoying. She was really an annoying girl. When they met for the first time, she didn't let him have a good time. After that, she didn't get along with him every time. Maybe she didn't get along with him. He swung his sleeves and walked out of the shop, only to see that Qin Wanru had gone to the side alley, where the carriage of Qin's mansion was parked. He remembered the mark on it. Let's go. Chu Liuxin rolled his eyes and lifted his legs to walk to his carriage. The little eunuch looked at the carriage of Qin's mansion, and then looked at the carriage of his mansion. He hurriedly followed. Why did he feel that this matter was not over yet? Qin Wanru got on her carriage and ordered the carriage to go to the shop that Nanny Dong bought for her. It was still early, so she could choose a suitable hairpin later. As soon as the carriage turned a corner, Qin Wanru, who was sitting in the carriage, felt that the carriage seemed to be hit by something. If Yu Jie hadn't protected her in time, she would have hit her head. What's going on? Yu Jie asked outside the carriage after protecting Qin Wanru, who was still in shock, to sit down. There's a carriage squeezed to one side. The coachman looked awkwardly at the large, luxurious carriage beside him and said helplessly. The road was actually not narrow, but the carriage of this lord had to squeeze into him like this. After squeezing again and again, the Qin Manor's carriage was squeezed to the corner, and the road ahead was almost blocked. Let other carriages pass first. Qin Wanru thought that the carriage had taken the lead and said, Miss, that carriage doesn't move. The coachman looked at the carriage that also stopped and said, Miss, I'm going to see which mansion's carriage is so rude. Yu Jie was angry, lifted the curtain, and was about to go out. It turned out that it was not the carriage of another mansion that accidentally bumped into her carriage, but the carriage of another mansion that forced her carriage to stop. But she didn't know who made things difficult for her. Yu Jie, stop for a moment. Seeing that Yu Jie lifted the curtain and was about to go out, Qin Wanru stopped her and reached out to lift a corner of the curtain, trying to see which carriage was full of malice. When she lifted the curtain, the carriage next to her also lifted the curtain. Chu Liuxin's proud smile froze for a moment when he saw Qin Wanru's pure eyes. It had been some time since he last saw Qin Wanru in Great Elder Princess Mansion. Qin Wanru's face already had the softness and purity of a young girl. When her watery eyes fell on Chu Liuxin's face, Chu Liuxin's handsome face immediately turned slightly red. He inexplicably felt that he had gone too far. In fact, it was quite undignified for him to be so calculative with a girl. The two carriages were very close to each other, and the windows were almost opened at the same time. When they looked at each other, they immediately felt very close to each other, so close that Chu Liuxin could almost see Qin Wanru's jade-like skin clearly. The eyelashes above her big watery eyes were like butterfly wings. They fluttered twice, leaving two uneven shadows on her pink face. What do you mean, Prince Xin? Qin Wanru did not expect that the opposite was Chu Liuxin, nor did she expect that Chu Liuxin would also open the window at this time. But she reacted very quickly and calmed down. After looking at him silently for a few times, she asked, Looking at the delicate and beautiful little face, Chu Liuxin suddenly felt that his mind was blank. At this time, he did not know what to say. The little eunuch sitting next to him hurriedly and gently pulled the corner of his clothes. "I have something to ask you." Chu Liuxin's reaction was not slow, and he immediately reacted. He coughed in a low voice and said with a straight face, "What's the urgent matter, Your Highness Prince Exe? Why do you force my carriage to stop on the side of the road?" Qin Wanru tilted her head and looked ahead. There was a turn at the intersection ahead, and this road happened to be occupied by the wide carriage of Prince Exian's mansion. If her carriage continued to move, it would hit a shop on the side. "It's a very important thing. It's the hairpin just now. I don't want it." Chu Liuxin hesitated for a while, and at this time he finally came to his senses. "What do you mean, Your Highness Prince Exian?" Qin Wanru did not understand what he meant. She frowned slightly. Just now, he tried his best to grab her hairpin, but at this time he actually did not want it anymore. "I mean..." Looking at Qin Wanru's clear watery eyes, Chu Liuxin felt that his heart was beating a little faster, and he was very uncomfortable. He sat up straight and looked for a suitable reason. He even regretted what he had done just now. Why was he so impulsive just now? He asked the carriage of Qin's mansion to push the carriage of Qin's mansion aside. Until now, he could not find a suitable reason. Bang! A loud crash came to Qin Wanru's ears. In Qin Wanru's astonished eyes, the carriage of Prince Exian's mansion shook a few times and hit a shop in front. It was a rice and flour shop. After being hit by the carriage of Prince Exian's mansion, the wooden pillar at the head shook and almost broke. The carriage of Prince Exian's mansion was overturned in front of Qin Wanru. Fortunately, it was stuck next to the pillar and did not completely overturn. It was half tilted there. The guards hurriedly jumped off their horses and pulled Chu Liuxin, who was in a daze, out of the carriage. When they saw that the young prince was fine, the guards breathed a sigh of relief. "Who hit me and smashed their carriage?" Chu Liuxin reached out to cover his face. He did not know where his handsome face had hit just now, and he felt a dull pain. His eyes flashed over and met Qin Wanru's astonished watery eyes. Under her long eyelashes, her watery eyes were astonished, and then a very faint smile appeared. The curtain of the carriage fell. Chu Liuxin became more and more angry. His whole face turned red, and he angrily stared at the carriage that had pushed his carriage into the shop. Seeing that his guards were timid and did not dare to come forward, he became more and more annoyed. He only felt that he had been disgraced by them today. No matter who was in the opposite carriage, he would never spare him. "Fourth brother, do you want to smash my carriage?" A somewhat gloomy voice came from the carriage that came later. A guard went over to roll up the curtain of the carriage. When he saw Chu Liuxin leaning against the carriage, Chu Liuxin only felt that he could not swallow his anger, but he could not spit it out either. His whole face was twisted. How could it be Chu Liuxin? Why did they meet Chu Liuxin? "Fourth brother, your carriage stopped here. Don't you want to enter this shop? Let me help you." Chu Liuxin raised his face and looked at Chu Liuxin with a gloomy smile. Chu Liuxin's anger was suddenly frozen, and then slowly disappeared. "Third brother, you misunderstood me. I just happened to walk here and accidentally squeezed with other carriages. I was just about to leave." Chu Liuxin finally swallowed his anger. This time, if it was anyone else, he would not so easily stop, even if it was Chu Luiyue or Chu Liuzhou. But it was Chu Liuxin. He had to suffer this loss even if he did not want to. "Well, it turns out that fourth brother is not going to the shop. I misunderstood you. Then my carriage will move back, and fourth brother can go out first." Chu Liuxin's smile became gentle. He waved his hand, and his carriage moved back to make a large space. Chapter 269. The next moment, the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion rushed up and blocked the position of the carriage of Prince Exian's mansion. The windows of the two carriages happened to be facing each other. Qin Wanru heard the sound of knocking on the window. She had no choice but to lift the curtain and saw Chu Liuxin's handsome and cold face. He raised his eyes and stared at her strangely. She could tell who had provoked him at first glance. Qin Wanru couldn't help but sigh at her bad luck. He was dressed in a flamboyant red robe with golden dark patterns embroidered on the collar. The unusual magnificence made his face as pale as snow without a trace of blood, but it made people feel that his face was exquisite and extremely beautiful. Qin Wanru had to admire him. A man like him was indeed a different kind of beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Even if he was just an ordinary person, his appearance would deeply attract women. Child, what a coincidence! Qin Wanru smiled like a flower. Chu Luchen snorted and said, Unfortunately, I'm here to see you. Child, what do you want to see me for? Qin Wanru's heart skipped a beat and she asked in surprise with her watery eyes wide open. Where's my Tang Chenyan? Chu Luchen looked at her and suddenly smiled. The sudden smile made his handsome black eyes shimmering and enchanting. Qin Wanru's heart instinctively twitched and she answered more carefully, Child's Tang Chenyan is still growing at my window, and it's growing very well. What's growing well? Blooming? Chu Luchen asked. Qin Wanru shook her head hurriedly and said, No. Since you don't, what's there to talk about? Chu Liuchen's voice was gentle, but there was a hidden majesty. Qin Wanru complained in her heart. She clearly knew that this Tang Chenyan meant a lot because Chu Luchen spent a lot of money to ask her to raise it. She had to bite the bullet and talk nonsense seriously. Maybe it's not used to the climate here since it just arrived in the capital city. It may bloom next year. Bloom next year? What's the use of this flower? Chu Luchen said leisurely. It was not like a question, but more like a soliloquy. However, Qin Wanru couldn't understand it at the moment. She could only blink her bright watery eyes and pretend that she didn't hear it. It was really difficult for her to answer this question. He couldn't say that the flower was useless and throw it away, but he also couldn't insist that the flower was useful. If it was useful, why didn't it bloom? Bring out the flowers and follow me to see a gardener. It seemed that Chu Luchen really didn't want Qin Wanru to answer. After murmuring to himself, he waved his hand. I just went out today. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to go out tomorrow. Qin Wanru said anxiously. How about I go to your Ningyuan army general's mansion and directly invite you to go with me? Chu Luchen squinted at her with a faint smile. He leaned back as if there was something like a cushion behind him. Immediately, his posture became more and more languid. He was like a young man, unparalleled in the world. A pair of handsome eyes were slightly raised. His slightly pale eyes were enchanting and dazzling in the bright red brocade. Qin Wanru involuntarily lowered her head and complained more bitterly in her heart. He meant that if she couldn't find a reason to go out tomorrow, he would force his way into the mansion. With his identity, if he really broke into her mansion and invited her to go with him, it would be really a big deal. Qin Wanru smiled dryly. She didn't realize that her smile actually looked pitiful. She said, Your Highness, I should obey your orders. How dare I break the contract? I will find a reason to go out tomorrow. Okay, that's a deal. Remember to bring the flowers. Chu Luchen said. After that, the curtain in his hand fell down neatly. Then the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion moved slightly and moved forward slowly. The road was cleared. Seeing Chu Liuchen's carriage leaving, Qin Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. She asked Yu Jie to tell the coachman to drive the carriage out of the blind corner carefully and move forward slowly. Chu Liuchen's carriage was in front. After making a turn, it turned to a larger official road. This was the official road to the palace. Originally, Chu Luchen wanted to go to the palace. Of course, many people didn't understand that if Prince Chen wanted to see the Empress Dowager, he could directly enter the palace from the side door. Why did he need to make such a long detour to enter the palace from the main door? Of course, no one dared to ask Prince Chen this question. Anyway, Prince Chen was very favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. He could do whatever he wanted. Therefore, seeing him make such a long detour to enter the palace, everyone was used to it. They just thought that this was the prince's hobby. How could you expect him to do things that were reasonable when he was so sick and on the brink of death? Even if there were some behaviors that were different from ordinary people, everyone agreed. This was their approval of the deposed crown prince's body, not his identity. Who would bother with a person who was about to die? On the road, some people knew the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion, so they all retreated to both sides. They knew that Prince Chen was a sick man who couldn't be touched. His body was like a piece of paper. If anyone offended him and something happened to him, no one could bear the responsibility. The carriage didn't stop at the gate of the palace. It continued to go inside. The palace servants on both sides naturally made way. Every single one of the officials bowed respectfully. With Prince Chen's health, he couldn't stand the long distance from the gate of the palace to the inner palace. In the carriage, Chu Luchen closed his eyes to rest. He was very peaceful, but there was no trace of blood on him. If it weren't for the slight rise and fall of his chest, people would really think that he was a statue made of jade. He was incomparably handsome but lifeless. "Stop, or you! How dare you not salute our prince?" Xiao Xuanzi's sharp voice sounded. In the carriage, Chu Liuchen's long eyelashes fluttered twice, but he didn't even open his eyes. He continued to close his eyes to rest. "Your Highness, I pay my respects to you." A voice came from outside the carriage. It should be the eunuch who didn't salute when he saw Chu Liuchen's carriage pass by. "Just now, I was thinking about what the emperor said and was a little absent-minded. I didn't have time to salute Prince Chen." Duke Xing is really a pillar of the imperial court. You are thinking about national affairs while walking. It's really a blessing to have an official like Duke Xing in the imperial court. Xiao Xuanzi's sarcastic voice was full of provocation. Other eunuchs really didn't dare to say this. After all, Duke Xing was an important minister in the imperial court, and a small eunuch couldn't criticize him. However, this eunuch was a eunuch of Prince Chen's mansion and Chu Liuchen's personal eunuch. As long as this kind of thing was marked by Chu Liuchen, it would be reasonable even if it was unreasonable. That person was doomed to die. If he was provoked, he might do something. No one dared to confront him head-on. This was also the reason why Chu Liuxin directly left in defeat when he saw that it was Chu Luchen who came. A dying man could do anything, not to mention that he was favored. "I'm sorry for my rudeness." Duke Xing's attitude was very good. His face was still full of smiles. Even though he was scolded by a eunuch, he still said with a smile, "Duke Xing, you are not rude. It's me who is rude. But my master is not in good health today and is not in a good mood." Xiao Xuanzi suddenly put away the coldness and harshness on his face. He laughed and lowered his voice, as if they had a very good relationship and were very trusted subordinates. Yes, thank you, eunuch Xiao Xuanzi." Duke Xing nodded repeatedly and lowered his voice unconsciously. He glanced at the half-closed window. The window was half open, and only half of the jade-like handsome face of the person inside could be seen. He didn't see Chu Liuchen's eyes, so he didn't know whether he was open or closed. "Then I'll go in with my master." The Empress Dowager summoned my master again. My master was very depressed when he got up early in the morning. He wanted to go out to relax, so he went around. Xiao Xuanzi's face was full of smiles, as if it was not him who scolded Duke Xing just now. He looked as pure as could be. If Qin Wanru saw this scene, she would definitely sigh with emotion. Like master, like servant, Xiao Xuanzi's skill of changing his face was really good. Although it was not 100%, it was at least 50% or 60%. His pure little expression really looked like a kind little eunuch. Was Xiao Xuanzi, the eunuch of Prince Qin, a good person? Many people in the palace who heard this would think it was a joke. At the moment, Duke Xing also thought so. After glancing at Xiao Xuanzi, Duke Xing cupped his hands to Xiao Xuanzi and stepped aside to make way for them. His attitude was extremely low, and he even spoke kindly to a eunuch without any disobedience. This was also an important reason why Duke Xing had an excellent reputation. But looking at his chubby and smiling face, people had a good impression of him. "Duke Xing, I'm leaving," Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile. The carriage started to move, but after a few steps, it was suddenly stopped by him. He poked his head out of the carriage, looked at Duke Xing, and suddenly waved to him mysteriously. Duke Xing looked around blankly and did not find anyone else. He picked up his robe and walked a few steps to the front of the carriage. "Duke, I want to ask you about something," Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile. His tone became more and more polite, and even his voice became several degrees sweeter, which was completely different from the scolding at the beginning. "What's the matter?" Duke Xing's attitude was still with a smile. His temper was really unparalleled. In the whole court, if Duke Xing's temper was the second best, no one could say that he was the best. Is there a new imperial physician in the Imperial Institute of Medicine? Xiao Xuanzi's voice became lower and lower, but it was also moderate. Duke Xing was sure that others could not hear it, but Prince Qin in the carriage must hear it. Therefore, even if he answered a little eunuch's question, he also thought about it. The emperor specially found a miracle-working physician from the south of the Yangtze River. I heard that his medical skills are excellent and superb. So what? Don't tell me it can cure this prince's illness? Xiao Xuanzi did not answer. A gentle but inexplicable voice came from the carriage window. It was Chu Liuchen's voice. Xiao Xuanzi did not speak, but smiled at Duke Xing apologetically. Chapter 270. His attitude and behavior were respectful and courteous. Those who saw him on the way all secretly gave him a thumbs up and thought that Duke Xing could really be called a model of good temper. Some courtiers saw him from a distance and felt indignant for him. He was such an important minister, while Prince Chen was just a deposed idle prince. Without the favor of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, he was really just a sick man with nothing. This imperial physician was found by Duke Xing with the help of him. After a low cough, Chu Liuchen said in an increasingly gentle voice, "Duke Xing, thank you for your hard work. However, I know my health well. I'd better not find a miracle-working doctor to come to the palace in the future." "Your Highness, how can you belittle yourself like this? Your health can be cured. The Emperor will find famous doctors all over the world to cure you," Duke Xing said with a serious face, but did not deny that he was the one who found the miracle-working doctor to come to the palace. "My health, ahem. I know. Thank you, Duke Xing." Chu Liuchen's voice became weak. From the window, it could be seen that his thin and pale lips were tightly pursed. It seemed that he was tired after just a few words. "Let's go. Your Highness, you must take care of yourself." Duke Xing stepped aside. When Chu Liuchen's carriage passed by, he heard Chu Liuchen's low voice, "Thank you, Duke Xing." The carriage moved forward slowly, as if it didn't dare to go too fast for fear of injuring the people in the carriage. Duke Xing slowly raised his head and looked at the back of the carriage meaningfully. "Your Highness, I saw Prince Qing just now." Xiao Xuanzi climbed into the carriage and said in a low voice, "Duke Xing and Prince Qing came out one after another just now. But when I stopped Duke Xing, Prince Qing disappeared." Prince Cheng was the younger brother of the current emperor and also Chu Liuchen's third uncle, Chu Cheng. The emperor now only had this younger brother, so even if he had a fief, he did not leave the capital city. However, this Prince Cheng believed in Buddhism, and it was said that he also wanted to become a monk. In the past, he did not live in his own mansion. Instead, he lived in temples. He was an extremely low-key prince of the imperial family. He had a high position but no power. Another one who can't sit still. Chu Liuchen slowly opened his beautiful eyes. His voice was gloomy and light. It should have been very pleasant to hear, but when it fell into people's ears, it was extremely cold and made people feel scared. "Master, shall we check it?" Xiao Xuanzi asked. "There's no rush. Let them be in chaos for a while." Chu Liuchen's voice was slightly lengthened, which made his voice sound a little gloomier than usual. It seemed to be a voice that came out from the lost ghost domain quietly, with endless creepiness. "What about the second miss?" Xiao Xuanzi peeped at his master's expression and felt that it was safe, so he cautiously reminded him. "Those who stayed in Jiangzhou can come back now." Chu Liuchen said lightly. "Yes, this servant understands." Xiao Xuanzi was overjoyed and excited. In fact, he hoped that the people from Jiangzhou would come back more than anyone else, so that at least they could prove second Miss Qin's origin. This was originally an idle chess piece arranged by his master at that time. He didn't expect that it would be useful one day. Xiao Xuanzi even felt that he wanted to say thank God. What about Jingxin Monastery? Suddenly, Xiao Xuanzi thought of another important thing and asked hurriedly. Chu Liuchen closed his eyes again. His long eyelashes fell on his pale handsome face, which had a kind of morbid but extreme beauty. "Deal with it together." Bring the nun from Jingshin Monastery to the capital city. Chu Luchen said with his eyes closed. I heard that she is not willing. Xiao Xuanzi said awkwardly. Then destroy Jingshin Monastery. Chu Luchen said coldly. Yes, I understand. Xiao Xuanzi nodded repeatedly. This meant that his master would let Mingqiu Nun come to the capital city no matter what. If she didn't come to the capital city, it meant that he would destroy Jingshin Monastery. He should tell the truth to Mingqiu Nun, so as not to irritate his master. Imperial grandmother will send an imperial physician here in a while. You know what to do. Chu Liuchen's face became paler and paler. He held his window with one hand. The blue veins stood out on his slender hand, and his lips were as white as snow. He looked sicker and weaker than before. Master, I know. Can you hold on? Xiao Xuanzi's voice was a little bit crying. I can't die. Chu Liuchen's voice was a little bit fierce. Xiao Xuanzi didn't dare to say more. He just looked at Chu Liuchen's uncomfortable look with worry. His eyes were red, but he didn't dare to reach out to help him. Finally, they arrived at the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. Xiao Xuanzi helped Chu Luchen get off the carriage. There was already a wheelchair waiting there. Xiao Xuanzi helped him sit down. With red eyes, he pushed Chu Luchen inside. The newly found doctor from Jiangnan had already been waiting in the Empress Dowager's palace. After saluting, the Empress Dowager asked the new imperial physician to treat Chu Luchen. But when the imperial physician finished feeling his pulse, before he had time to speak, he saw the sickly Prince Qin sitting in the wheelchair turn his eyes, his body soften, and he directly fainted. Xiao Xuanzi screamed and rushed over, pushing the imperial physician away. The Empress Dowager was so scared that her face changed greatly. She sat on the chair with her hands and feet twitching, and almost passed out. After she recovered, she kept shouting, Quick, go and ask the emperor to come here. The whole Palace of Benevolent Peace was in a mess. Qin Wanru didn't know that Chu Luchen had made such a big trouble after entering the palace. She was standing at the door of her own shop, looking at the signboard in front of her, Butterfly Clothing Shop, and slightly nodded. This name was not chosen by her, but recommended by Nanny Dong. This name was exactly the same as the reputation of Nanny Dong's shop in the previous life. Looking at the signboard above, she nodded and said, Nanny Dong, this name is good. Second miss, in fact, I didn't think of this name. Nanny Dong smiled bitterly and told the truth. Well, what do you mean? Qin Wanru walked slowly inside and asked casually. This is actually a dream of mine when I was young. At that time, I wanted to have such a name, but later things remained the same, but people changed, and I didn't realize it for many years. Now I named the shop according to second miss. Nanny Dong sighed, and her eyes were bitter. It seemed that there must be an inside story. But since Nanny Dong didn't want to say it, Qin Wanru didn't ask again. In the shop, Dong Xiu'er also came out to greet her. Since that incident, she moved out to live with Nanny Dong, and now it seemed that it was right. Dong Xiu'er looked a little more smiling and lively than when she was in the inner courtyard of Qin's mansion. Seeing Qin Wanru coming in, she hurriedly put down the silk thread in her hand and came to salute. She was also grateful to Qin Wanru, because she was almost reduced to a victim of a conspiracy. After Nanny Dong helped her to analyze it more deeply, she understood it more and more. When she understood what she had done, Dong Xiu'er was also in a cold sweat. She almost lost her reputation and her life. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and raised her hand to indicate that she didn't need to salute. She asked with a smile, How about the recruited embroidery maids? They have been recruited in the past few days. At this time, they are on the 3rd floor. I want them to embroider some first. When the shop officially opens, there will be some different samples. Nanny Dong pointed upstairs and said, This arrangement was very reasonable. The 1st and 2nd floors were for business, and the 3rd floor was the place where the embroidery maids worked. Some extremely precious materials were not allowed to be taken back by the embroidery maids. It was necessary to have such a place where they could work. Besides, some of them wanted to directly make clothes, which also needed to be done here. Qin Wanru nodded and said, Thank you, Nanny Dong. Second miss, you are too polite. If it weren't for you, I would still be in Jiangzhou, poor and helpless, and Xiaoer's feet would still be. Second miss, thank you for your kindness. Nanny Dong bowed deeply to Qin Wanru and turned the gratitude from her heart into action. Dong Xiaoer, who was beside her, also saluted. Nanny Dong, you are too polite. Now, when are we going to officially open the shop? Qin Wanru sat down on the chair that Nanny Dong prepared for her, looked around, and said, everything here had been prepared. It could be said that everything was ready, except for one thing. The layout of the shop was clean and tidy. There were also materials, embroidery products, toggle and loop buttons, and beautiful embroidery edges on display on the counter. Qin Wanru came here today to choose a very good auspicious day to officially open the shop. In fact, she had chosen it before, but yesterday Nanny Dong suddenly sent a message that she wanted to choose another one. The auspicious day that I chose before is actually not bad, but I thought that the flower-admiring banquet will be held soon. If we can open it before that, I am afraid that the business will be better. If we can become popular at once, the business will be much easier in the future, Nanny Dong said with a smile. It turned out that this was Nanny Dong's idea. No wonder she suddenly sent a message. In fact, this coincided with Qin Wanru's idea. Since she received the invitation card from the palace, Qin Wanru wanted to discuss with Nanny Dong again and advance the opening day of the shop. Everything in the shop was ready, so she would not feel too hasty. It should be a little inconvenient, but it should not be a big deal. This is good. It can indeed attract some misses who want to show off at the palace banquet. The characteristics of our toggle and loop buttons are a little different from those in the capital. Qin Wanru looked at some exquisite toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges on the counter. Compared with the methods in the capital, there were more tulle, which made these toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges look a little fairy. Second miss, I have also prepared 2 sets of clothes for you. They are both made of our materials, which were chosen by second miss before. Add a tulle petticoat, with toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges. It is very beautiful. Nanny Dong said as she walked into the inner room, took out 2 gift boxes, and sent them to the table. Qin Wanru opened them. Even though she had already guessed that the clothes were not ordinary, she could not help but marvel at this time. Yu Jie stepped forward and unfolded the clothes. At first glance, even Yu Jie, who had never paid attention to clothes, could not help but marvel, and her eyes lit up. Miss, these clothes are really beautiful. You must be very beautiful in them. Chapter 271. Second miss is extraordinarily beautiful. If you wear these 2 sets of clothes, which are different from those in the capital, they will immediately become more beautiful. At that time, second miss only needs to say that these clothes are made by Butterfly Clothing Shop. Madame Dong said meaningfully. Madame Dong's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's beautiful face, which was both angry and happy at the same time. Such clothes were very fairy-like, but they complemented Qin Wanru's appearance. Madame Dong believed in her judgment. As long as second miss wore such clothes, her clothes and style would definitely be famous in the capital, and the reputation of Butterfly Clothing Shop would immediately be known. Even if not many people knew before and not many misses would come here to choose clothes, after this banquet, the reputation of Butterfly Clothing Shop would be known. Then let's do it. How about opening the shop tomorrow? Qin Wanru made the decision with a smile. Okay, I understand. Will second miss come here tomorrow? Madame Dong asked. Qin Wanru was the owner of this shop, but it was Madame Dong on the surface. I will come and have a look, but I may not necessarily enter the shop. Qin Wanru said with a smile. It happened that she hadn't thought of a good excuse to leave the mansion tomorrow. Others didn't know the opening of her shop, but her grandmother and mother knew it. It was reasonable for her to go out. Even if she couldn't show her face directly, it was necessary to look at it secretly. Okay, actually I have prepared everything here. Second miss, please tell me. Madame Dong said with a smile, full of joy. She increasingly felt that it was a wise thing to follow the little master in front of her to the capital. She was not like some owners who pretended to know what they didn't know, and also gave orders on the side. It would be strange if they could do it as an outsider. On the other hand, Qin Wanru let Madame Dong do it. She also gave Madame Dong some reasonable suggestions on some things. As for some things, their ideas coincided. Madame Dong was really pleased about this. The longer she got along with this second miss, the more she didn't dare to look down on this second Mississippi. She felt that this second miss was smarter than others and was not as weak as she looked. However, this also convinced Madame Dong more and more, and she felt that she didn't follow the wrong master. As for Dong Xiaoa, it made Madame Dong more and more loyal to Qin Wanru. Next, the two of them had some detailed discussions about the opening of the shop. Because it was inconvenient for Qin Wanru, as the owner, to show up, they did not reveal the background of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. They only dealt with several nearby shops. Nanny Dong was also a person with money and power. It didn't take long for her to have a good relationship with some shopkeepers around. It didn't take a long time, and she had a good relationship with some shopkeepers around. After finishing the details, Qin Wanru went upstairs to have a look at the embroidery maids upstairs and the decoration on the second floor. She was very satisfied with everything and then got on the carriage with Yu Jie. Madame Dong sent Qin Wanru to the carriage, and then she went to the shop. Qin. Madame Miss Qin and Miss, said. Miss Qin. Qin Wanru came out of Butterfly clothing shop. After the carriage took a few turns, it stopped at the door of a gold shop. This shop was not as big as the previous one, but there were many guests. Most of them were misses from aristocratic families, and they were served by servant girls and old maids. At first glance, one could know that they were of extraordinary status. It seemed that the invitation of the flower appreciation banquet in the palace had made the whole market in the capital city more prosperous. When the carriage stopped, Qin Wanru got off the carriage with Yu Jie, wearing a curtain hat, and went directly into the shop. When she looked inside, she found that it was even bigger than the previous one. No wonder it could write the words, "Century-old shop," on the door. Among the 100 shops, there were changes of the Imperial court. Ordinary shops couldn't be called century-old. This shop only had one floor, but it was spacious and had many counters. Qin Wanru looked at them one by one, and finally stopped in front of a set of ornaments with a cat's eye stone. The cat's eye stone didn't look as brilliant as the ruby, and it looked a little dim at first glance. So almost no one looked at this set of ornaments. Everyone looked at the ornaments made of ruby. Seeing that someone finally came, the shop assistant hurriedly ran over and introduced. Miss, this was custom made by a master in our shop. Although it's just a cat's eye stone, it will shine with a different luster under the sun. The craftsmanship is also very exquisite. The whole cat's eye stone is made according to different prototypes. This set of ornaments consisted of a hairpin, a decorative flower, 2 earrings, and a necklace. The hairpin was in the shape of a plum blossom, and the yellow stamens were made of cat's eye stone. The delicate golden silk lace outside looked unique, and it was indeed different from other hairpins. The decorative flower was also mainly made of pulled golden silk threads, and the picture was a picture of butterflies playing. The stamens of the broken flowers between the 2 butterflies were all made of cat's eye stone. The shapes were slightly different, but they looked similar at first glance. Together with the butterflies made of golden silk threads, it was both delicate and beautiful. There were also a few rice grain-sized beads under the butterfly wings, which added a little elegance to the decorative flower. Generally speaking, this set of ornaments was mainly simple and elegant, which matched well with the clothes that Nanny Dong had made for Qin Wanru before. However, because it was inconspicuous, it was neglected here, which made Qin Wanru pick it up. Wrap it up. Qin Wanru nodded. Yu Jie said, "Okay." The shop assistant was overjoyed. His counter was not comparable to the ruby counter over there, and he hadn't done business all day today. Hearing Yu Jie's words, he immediately became energetic. While asking someone to take Yu Jie to pay the bill, he carefully wrapped the set of ornaments and introduced it to Qin Wanru cleverly. "Miss, this set of hair ornaments is the treasure of our shop. It's just that no one can recognize it. Miss, you've chosen a good one." The treasure of the shop? Qin Wanru smiled slightly. It was not that she didn't believe it. Along the way, she really felt that this craftsmanship was the most beautiful and the most exquisite. Of course it is the treasure of the shop, and it was just brought here. If it was brought here earlier, even if no one noticed it here, it would inevitably be bought by someone who knew it. Miss, you are lucky, the shop assistant said with a smile, but he didn't slow down. Why do you say it is the treasure of the shop? Qin Wanru was interested in this aspect, so she asked with a smile. The shop assistant raised his head and looked around before saying in a low voice, "This set of ornaments was brought out by our shopkeeper today. It was made by the best craftsman in our shop. Not everyone can ask the best craftsman in our shop to make ornaments just because they want to. The master in your shop is not willing to make ornaments?" Qin Wanru was surprised. She was really surprised. This master was really arrogant. Of course, we are a century-old shop. If there is no master at this level, how can it be regarded as a century-old shop? Many customers come here because of the reputation and want the master to make a custom, but the master takes orders depending on his mood. Most of the time, it is other masters who take orders. Look, there are people asking the master to make a custom. The shop assistant reached out and pointed to a counter at the corner, where there was also a special shop assistant to receive customers, but there was no goods. Over there is the place to make a custom. Our shop can make custom jewelry according to the gems provided by the customers, but it is difficult to ask the master to make a custom. The shop assistant clicked his tongue and said, "They don't know that the master's set of ornaments has already been placed in the counter. Miss, you are not lucky." Hearing what he said, Qin Wanru was also happy and raised the corner of her mouth. In this way, wasn't it her good luck? At this time, Yujie had paid the bill and came over. She showed the receipt to the shop assistant, who took it and handed the ornaments to Yujie with a smile. Since the ornaments had been bought, Qin Wanru did not stay any longer. She turned around and was about to go out. She had been out for a long time, and it was time to go back. When she just left the counter and was walking to the door of the shop, a man hurriedly came over from the counter. He was also a shop assistant. He walked to the side of the shop assistant who had bandaged Qin Wanru before, wiped his sweat and asked, "Where is the cat's eye stone ornaments? The shopkeeper told you to put them away first. Don't buy them because there is already a buyer." "What this is just bought." The former shop assistant was stunned and said, "Just bought? Who bought it?" The shop assistant ran over and asked quickly, This lady." The shop assistant looked around and immediately saw the back of Qin Wanru and Yujie. He hurriedly reached out and pointed at them. "Go, stop them." The shop assistant who came later said with a gloomy face, "This set of ornaments has been ordered by someone, and you can't buy it anymore." "But they have already paid for it." The shop assistant in front said awkwardly. "So what? Do you know which miss has ordered this set of ornaments?" The shop assistant behind lowered his voice and said, "I don't know." The shop assistant in front shook his head and looked at the back of Qin Wanru who had walked to the door, and said uneasily, "That is the miss of Duke Yong's mansion." The shopkeeper also wanted to flatter her, so he wanted to say that this set of ornaments was made by a master. When the miss heard that it was the work of a master in our shop, she immediately bought it. The shop assistant who came later also saw the backs of Qin Wanru and Yujie and was really anxious. After stamping his feet, he turned around and ran inside, saying as he ran, "I am going to report to the shopkeeper now. We can't deal with this matter." Although they couldn't offend Duke Yong's mansion, the miss who walked out looked extraordinary. They didn't know which family she came from, and their shop couldn't afford to offend her. After thinking about it, it was better to let them solve it themselves. The shop assistant who came later ran away, and the former shop assistant was a little dumbfounded. Seeing that Qin Wanru was stepping out of the shop at this time, he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It would be fine if she left. Even if the miss of Duke Yong's mansion made a fuss, so what? If she left, she couldn't get back. The miss of an aristocratic family also cared about her reputation. But the next moment, the shop assistant's face stiffened, and he helplessly saw a miss coming from behind with two servant girls in an aggressive manner. It seemed that she came with bad intentions. Since she came out of the shopkeeper's room, he could guess that this miss with bad intentions was the miss of Duke Yong's mansion. The shop assistant was a little flustered and involuntarily came out from behind the counter. Chapter 272. When Qin Wanru stepped out of the door with Yu Jie, she suddenly heard an angry voice behind her. "The lady in front, please wait a minute." Qin Wanru looked around and found that there were women passing by. They were all going inside, but she was the only one going outside. She blinked her watery eyes, turned around, and looked at the person who chased after her. At first glance, she found that she knew her. Di Fenglan of Duke Yong's mansion looked at her angry look and knew that she was not a nice person. She looked at her calmly but did not speak. Qin Wanru wore a curtain hat and covered her face, so Di Fenglan did not recognize her at first. But when she turned to look at Yu Jie, her eyes suddenly widened and her face changed. "Qin Wanru. Miss Di, why did you stop me in such a hurry?" Qin Wanru said with a slight smile. "I was wondering who was so anxious to buy the cat's eye ornament that I ordered. It turned out to be you." Di Fenglan sneered. "If Miss Di has nothing to do, I will leave. Grandma is still waiting for me in the mansion." Qin Wanru did not answer Di Fenglan's words and said with an extremely calm attitude. "Qin Wanru, the ornament you just bought was ordered by me early." Di Fenglan was so angry that her face turned pale. She stared at Qin Wanru coldly. She knew that it was the work of the most difficult master to invite in this shop, so she would not let it go so easily. Even if this ornament was ordinary, with such a reputation, it was enough to make her stand proudly above all the misses from aristocratic families. Since it was ordered early, why didn't the shop assistant at the counter say it just now? And he repeatedly said that this ornament was not ordered by anyone. Why did Miss D rush out to grab it when I just bought it? Could it be that as long as you look at it, you are the one who ordered it? Qin Wanru said. Her watery eyes fell on Di Fenglan through the veil. She had no intention of flinching and was not afraid at all. Being too low-key would only make people look down on her, especially when she had already paid. If she obediently gave up the ornament at this time, others would only laugh at her cowardice, and it would be taken as a joke in the future. There was no need to endure when she should not. How dare you? Second Miss Qin, do you know who you are talking to? A servant girl behind Di Fenglan stood up, raised her head, looked at Qin Wanru proudly and scolded. Qin Wanru glanced at her indifferently and said nothing. Yu Jie looked the servant girl up and down and said, Who do you think you are? How can our miss talk to a servant like you? Is this the rule of Duke Yong's mansion? When the master is talking, the servant girls can interrupt at will. The servant girl who followed Di Fenglan had always been arrogant. Being said by Yu Jie in front of everyone, she immediately blushed, widened her eyes, and said sharply, Where did you come from? How can you be so rude? No matter how rude I am, I'm still more polite than you. Yu Jie looked surprised. She looked the servant girl up and down and interrupted her rudely. Do you think it's polite to stop people who buy things on the street? Ningyuan Army General's mansion really doesn't understand this rule. What a sharp-tongued servant girl. Di Fenglan's face was gloomy. Well said. I'm not as clever as Miss Di's servant girl. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Her indifferent attitude made Di Fenglan even angrier. Her beautiful face lost its usual color because of anger. Qin Wanru, this ornament is really ordered by me. If you don't believe me, I can ask the shopkeeper to come out. She took a deep breath and told herself that she could not be angry. Now she was not in her own Duke Yong's mansion. Go, ask the shopkeeper to come out. Di Fenglan said to a servant girl beside her. The servant girl answered and ran into the shop in a hurry. Miss Di, even if you ordered it, I've already bought it. Am I not as good as the one you ordered after I paid for it? Qin Wanru said with cold eyes. Originally, she didn't care much about this set of cat's eye jewelry. Although it was exquisite and beautiful, it was not necessary for Qin Wanru. But now Di Fenglan made such a scene, she would not give this set of jewelry away in any case. Even if the shopkeeper said something, the fact was that she paid for it and took it from this shop. Could it be possible that he would ask her to return it to him? Qin Wanru, I ordered it before you. Di Fenglan felt that she was going to explode with anger. I've already paid for it. Qin Wanru said coldly. After saying that, she did not want to be entangled with Di Fenglan too much. As they made such a scene, the gate was surrounded by people. Even if she wore a curtain hat, She felt uncomfortable being stared at. Qin Wanru, are you guilty? Di Fenglan shouted anxiously when she saw that Qin Wanru was going to leave. He's coming, the shopkeeper is coming. The crowd dispersed to both sides. A gentle-looking man followed the servant girl of Duke Yong's mansion and walked over. He looked at Qin Wanru with embarrassment and then looked at Di Fenglan. In fact, he didn't want to offend either of them. At this time, he also blamed himself for talking too much. This Miss D came to order a set of jewelry from the master. He hinted that there was a set of jewelry customized by the master, but the master was unwilling to say that it was customized by him. Later, Di Fenglan said that she wanted such a set, but when he asked someone to get it, he was told that it had just been bought by someone. So this Miss Yong refused to stop and chased after him. In fact, of course, this miss bought it justifiably. But because Di Fenglan was the miss of Duke Yong's mansion, the shopkeeper certainly would not say so. Miss, this set of ornaments was really customized by Miss D long ago. The servants didn't know it, so they bought it for you by mistake. Our shop is willing to compensate for your loss and buy it back at double the price. The shopkeeper braced himself to stand in front of Qin Wanru and explained with a smile. If it was bought as an ordinary ornament, the price of this set of cat's eye stone ornaments was very ordinary. But if it was bought for Di Fenglan, who had known that it was made by a master, the price could certainly be doubled. The shopkeeper was a businessman, and he had a clear calculation in his mind. In this way, he could not offend this miss, but also make the miss of Duke Yong's mansion happy, and he would not lose anything. So after evaluating the current situation, the shopkeeper immediately felt that this was the best solution. If there is a mistake in your shop, it is naturally your shop's business. This set of ornaments is now mine, and it is also up to me to decide whether to sell it or not. Qin Wanru looked at the shopkeeper and said coldly, "But miss, we are willing to sell it back at double the price. Moreover, you are still at the door of my shop, and it has not been a long time." Under Di Fenglan's stare, the shopkeeper continued to persuade Qin Wanru with a smile. "I heard that this set of ornaments was just taken out today?" Qin Wanru asked. "Yes, it is. It was the servants who made a mistake and took it out." The shopkeeper nodded repeatedly. "The servants made a mistake? Since it is custom-made, there should be a receipt, right? Shopkeeper, show me the receipt. If there is, maybe we can discuss it. If there is no." Qin Wanru's gentle words became cold. "If there is no receipt, it means that your shop is deceiving you. Do you think our Ningyuan army general's mansion is easier to bully than Duke Yong's mansion, so you collude with others to bully me?" Yu Jie took a step forward, stretched out her hand, and said to the shopkeeper in an extremely clear voice, "Shopkeeper, take out the receipt and have a look. Whether it's settled or not, we can't just rely on your words. Who knows if you've taken some benefits from it and deliberately helped others to bully our miss." The shopkeeper's face changed dramatically, and his hands trembled slightly. He did not have the receipt, and he just said it casually. Looking at the shopkeeper's face, Qin Wanru knew that she was right, and her eyes became calmer. "Shopkeeper, please show me the receipt, and we will know at a glance." "If there is no receipt, then—" She did not finish her words, but the meaning in her words made the shopkeeper's heart involuntarily rise. The shopkeeper's heart couldn't help but rise to his throat. On such a cold day, cold sweat actually appeared on his forehead. He never thought that this young lady in front of him would actually know so much about this matter. Shouldn't the miss of an aristocratic family always stay in the back house, never go out, and know nothing about affairs? Why did the miss in front of him give him a feeling that she was good at this? Of course, the shopkeeper did not know that in order to open the shop, Qin Wanru had a deep understanding of some things on the counter and the account. Regarding the order, she especially asked Nanny Dong about the specific affairs. "I will give you the receipt later. You return this set to the shop first. Do you think I owe you a receipt?" Di Fenglan saw that the shopkeeper was weak and said impatiently, Yes, please make it convenient for me, Mississippi. I really place an order and don't give it to Miss D. My shop can't afford this responsibility," the shopkeeper said with sweat all over his head. It seemed that he had to do it anyway. The shopkeeper's words were extremely pitiful, as if she deliberately made things difficult for him if she didn't give it to him. Qin Wanru suddenly smiled and said, "Shopkeeper, your boss has always trusted you, right?" After hearing this, the shopkeeper's face changed dramatically, and he looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment. His mouth trembled, but he could not say a word. It's just that no matter how much your boss trusts the shopkeeper, he can still control the things in the shop. If you ask carefully, it's actually very easy to know. If your boss thinks. Qin Wanru's voice was very calm and gentle, without the arrogant and disgusting sharpness of Di Fenglan, but it inexplicably made people feel oppressed. She spoke with certainty and evidence. The shopkeeper suddenly thought that his boss would know this matter, and his back was soaked with cold sweat. He only cared about pleasing Miss D of Duke Yong's mansion before, but he did not think that this matter would inevitably attract the attention of his boss, especially the matter of this master. His boss had always paid attention to it. Chapter 273. The shopkeeper's retreat immediately showed that the so-called order was fake, but it could be seen from the shopkeeper's guilty look. The onlookers couldn't help but burst into laughter. Originally, some people really thought that Di Fenglan had an order, and Qin Wanru mistakenly bought the head ornament. It was reasonable, but it was a little inappropriate. At this moment, the shopkeeper's guilty look was obvious, and everyone understood. Di Fenglan's face turned blue and white. She was so angry that smoke came out of her 7 apertures, and she couldn't find a way out. "Miss D, if there is nothing else, I will leave first." Qin Wanru bowed sideways, and then left with Yujie. Di Fenglan wanted to go forward and hold Qin Wanru, but she also knew that it was inappropriate. Ningyuan Army General's mansion had a bad reputation recently, and Duke Yong's mansion also had a bad reputation because of Di Yen. This time, when she went out, Countess Yong also repeatedly warned her not to act as casually as before. "Miss D, why don't you order another set?" Next time, the shopkeeper's chatter was like a fly buzzing in her ears. Di Fenglan was angry and annoyed. She shouted sternly, "Shut up!" The voice in her ears stopped immediately. Taking advantage of the temporary silence, Di Fenglan looked around and found that there were several familiar misses in the crowd who were looking at her with sarcasm. She couldn't stay any longer, so she swung her sleeves fiercely and immediately turned to leave. The 2 servant girls followed her out closely. When the crowd saw that the 2 troublemakers had left, everyone dispersed. The shopkeeper stood at the door with an embarrassed face, looking at Qin Wanru, who had already got on the carriage, and Di Fenglan, who was really going to get on the carriage. He was also angry and annoyed, secretly regretting that he had said more at that time. Otherwise, the miss of Duke Yong's mansion wouldn't have chased them out. Things had come to this point, and he was also ashamed. But he really didn't have the courage to continue to help Di Fenglan. Others didn't know who his boss was, but how could he not know? If that person really found out that he helped the miss of Duke Yong's mansion to make a false certificate and insisted on making things bigger, his career as a shopkeeper would be over. "Innkeeper, the boss is here." A shop assistant hurriedly ran over and whispered something to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper's expression immediately changed. He didn't say anything else and hurriedly went to the back of the shop. Every time the boss came, he would enter the backyard from the back door. He had never come to look for him from the front. Qin Wanru wandered in the market again. After buying some daily necessities, she specially went to a medicine shop to pick some useful herbs for Madame Dowager and Shui Ruolin, and then returned to the mansion. She picked a lot of medicinal herbs and divided them into 3 portions. She kept 1 portion for herself and 2 portions for Shui Ruolin and Old Grandma. Then she asked 2 servant girls to send the 2 portions to Old Grandma and Shui Ruolin. After that, she returned to her Jifeng courtyard. When he arrived at the house, the medicinal herbs and the hair ornaments he bought today were placed on the table. Yujie curiously rummaged through the medicinal materials Qin Wanru bought this time and asked, "Miss, these are all used to nourish the body. Are you going to nourish yourself?" "No, Yujie, you go and smash these medicines first." Qin Wanru picked out a few medicinal herbs and said. Yujie took it and nodded. Looking at the medicinal herbs in her hand, she immediately realized, "Miss, are you going to make some fitness pills?" "Not pills, I'm going to make some medicinal cuisine. Qin Wanru shook her head. Although she knew how to make pills, it was not convenient to make them in her yard. Moreover, she had never made pills before. Although she knew the method, she might not be able to make it well. It was better to make some medicinal cuisine, which was more convenient. Didn't you just send some to Madame Dowager and Madame Shui? Qin Yu came in with tea and also looked around in confusion. Just now I put them in the medicine. As for these, they can help the people in the mansion to adjust their bodies. In this winter, they will feel better after adjusting their bodies. Although they haven't acclimatized to the climate, they are a little different after all. It is also good to adjust their bodies and use some medicinal cuisine. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully, "People in the mansion? In addition to Madame Dowager and Madame Shui, there are only you and the general." Yu Jie didn't understand for a moment. She looked at Qin Wanru and said, "The general is a general and has always been in good health. Do you also need to use this kind of treatment?" "It's always good to use some medicinal cuisine," Qin Wanru said with a smile and picked up a few medicinal cuisine prescriptions at hand. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she looked at them one by one. This was not the prescription given to her by Mingqiu Nun, but the prescription written by Nanny Zheng. "Tell my mother that I'm going to prepare some medicinal cuisine for the people in our mansion. Get the main kitchen to prepare a few more stoves to specially cook this kind of medicinal cuisine. Yes, please treat the people in our mansion. Don't use it for other purposes, lest the smell will go bad." Qin Wanru ordered while reading. "Yes, miss, I will report to Madame Shui later." Qin Yu nodded, and after saying that, she seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Yu Jie left with the medicinal herbs. She still stood beside Qin Wanru, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't casually. "Tell me what's going on?" Qin Wanru knew that Qin Yu wanted to say something, so she continued to read and said, "Miss, Qin Shui wants me to report to you that she wants to serve Madam." Qin Yu hesitated and said, "What?" A trace of deep sharpness flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes. She stopped reading and narrowed her watery eyes. It was a little interesting. "Qin Shui said she wants to serve Madam." Qin Yu answered hesitantly again. Although Qin Shui abandoned Madame D and joined Qin Wanru before, it was difficult for Qin Wanru to believe her because she used to work for Madame D. However, it was not easy for Qin Wanru to arrange her for a while, so Qin Wanru still let her be a leisurely principal servant girl. She took the principal servant girl's money, but she still didn't do anything important. Unexpectedly, Qin Shui took the initiative to ask for Madame D's help, and it was really hard for Qin Wanru not to think too much about it. Why does she want to go to Madame D's place? Qin Wanru put down the prescription in her hand and asked indifferently. She said, "Since Madame controlled her, she is willing to go to Madame D's side and help you keep an eye on Madame D. She only hopes that she can leave Qin's mansion one day and get rid of the identity of a servant girl." Since Qin Wanru had spoken, Qin Yu told her Qin Shui's request in detail. Qin Wanru was silent for a while, and then she said, "Go and ask Qin Shui to come here." Qin Yu nodded and hurriedly went out. After a while, Qin Shui, whose face was slightly pale, came in with her. As soon as she entered the door, Qin Shui kowtowed heavily to Qin Wanru, and then raised her head to look at Qin Wanru with tears in her eyes. She said bluntly, "Second miss, I hope you can help me." Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Qin Shui's face. Her eyes were so deep that they seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, which made Qin Shui, who was kneeling on the ground, shiver. Now she didn't dare to look down on this second Mississippi. "Are you going to serve Madame D?" "Yes, second miss, I used to work for Madame D. Since I entered the mansion, Madame D has been manipulating me secretly. In this case, I'd better serve Madame D directly, lest Madame D uses me to do something." Qin Shui bit her lip and said, "What do you have in her hands?" Qin Wanru turned her eyes and asked. Qin Shui's indenture was in her hands. When Qin Shui entered the mansion that day, she was the one who chose her. Of course, the indenture was in her hands. It was impossible for Madame D to have it. "Second miss, my parents and relatives are now working for Duke Yong's mansion. I dare not disobey Madame D." Qin Shui's tears fell down. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and said in detail. At the very beginning, when Qin Shui entered the mansion, she worked for Madame D. At that time, Madame D did not have to deal with Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin. She just thought that Qin Shui was clever, so she raised her as her confidant and asked others to train her. In order to avoid arousing Madame Dowager's suspicion in the mansion, she specially raised her in the farm. Later, when Madame D learned that Qin Wanru wanted a servant girl, she found a way to send her to the mansion. In order to prevent Madame Dowager from finding out, she deliberately burned her previous indenture and made a new one to send to Qin Wanru. When Madame D sent Qin Shui to Qin Wanru, she also gave Qin Shui's parents a lot of money and promised to subsidize them in the future. However, when Qin Shui came to Qin Wanru, she was not immediately put in an important position as Madame D expected. Qin Wanru even faintly alienated Qin Shui. But even so, Madame D did not intend to let Qin Shui come back. Instead, she became more grateful to Qin Shui and sent more money to her parents. Later, when she went to the capital city, she found an excuse to bring all of Qin Shui's family to the capital city. She also found jobs for them and asked them to work in the farm of Duke Yong's mansion. The work was easy and the wages were high. In this way, Qin Shui's family was sent to the jurisdiction of Duke Yong's mansion. If Qin Shui had any unusual moves, her family would not be well off. You go to Madame D now because you are afraid that your family will be harmed? After listening to Qin Shui's narration, Qin Wanru sorted out her thoughts. She slightly raised her watery eyes and looked at Qin Shui with unclear eyes. Yes, I think so. My identity has been exposed by Second Miss's side. Last time, Second Miss spared my life and I'm deeply indebted to her. I don't dare to ask for anything in vain or let Madame D have any other ideas. I'd better serve Madame D directly. In this way, Madame D has no excuse to ask me to harm Second Miss. Qin Shui wiped her tears, raised her red eyes and looked at Qin Wanru and said sadly, "You also have no other choice?" Qin Wanru said calmly. Her watery eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a treachery that made Qin Shui's heart tremble. But the topic was still gentle, which made her feel relieved. Qin Shui nodded hard and said, "Second Miss, I can only do this now. In order to be grateful for Second Miss's kindness, if I can get a word from Madame D, I will definitely come to tell Second Miss." These words were said with deep affection and righteousness, and the dilemma situation was also very obvious. It seemed that she could only do this in her current situation. Everyone would think so, but Qin Wanru was not included in this. Chapter 274. Qin Shui trembled all over, and her face immediately turned as white as snow. If you say that you are fine these days, you are really fine. Originally, I promised you that I would give you an idle job after a period of time, so that you could stay away from Madame D's attention. However, you are willing to get involved in this mess again. So be it. Qin Wanru snorted coldly, and her watery eyes under her long eyelashes were shimmering and cold. She waved her hand and decisively signaled that Qin Shui could leave. "Second Miss, I am." Qin Shui was anxious to explain, but Qin Yu had come to pull her. Looking at Qin Wanru's indifferent and cold look, Qin Shui felt like falling into an ice cave, and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. "Let's go. Whether you live or die in the future has nothing to do with our Mississippi. Our Miss has been very kind to you. If you want to die, you can't blame anyone," Qin Yu said as she pulled Qin Shui straight to the door. Seeing that she was about to be pulled out of the door, Qin Shui suddenly pushed Qin Yu away, rushed to Qin Wanru's feet, and pleaded loudly, "Second Miss, save me. Please save me." These words were said very urgently, accompanied by Qin Shui's uncontrollable trembling. Qin Wanru tilted her head and looked at Qin Yu. Her eyes seemed to have seen through everything, but she was extremely calm. "You have betrayed Madame D before. At this time, if you want to redeem her, you should want to give her a strong medicine, and you are that strong medicine." This was not a question, but a faint statement of a fact. Those beautiful little faces showed a look of relief, which made Qin Shui feel that she was more and more transparent in front of Second Mississippi. "Second Miss, please save me." Qing Shui cried so hard that her voice could not be heard, and her whole body fell to the ground. This time, without Qin Wanru asking, she told everything in detail. The reason why she suddenly made such a request was that her mother secretly sent her a message, asking her to obey Madame D's words. Moreover, her second brother was severely beaten a while ago because of a small mistake and was still lying in bed now. It was impossible for her to be beaten up for a small mistake, unless it was because of her previous mistake, which made the matter of the hairpin go wrong. Madame D did not plot against Qin Wanru, but plotted against her daughter. Although Madame D did not find out the truth, it did not prevent her from venting her anger on Qing Shui. Since Qing Shui was nominally Qin Wanru's woman, Madame D could not reach out to her at will. She vented her anger on Qing Shui's family. Qing Shui's mother asked someone to bring a message to Qing Shui, telling her not to disobey Madame D. Otherwise, her whole family would suffer. Moreover, she straightforwardly asked Qing Shui to ask to leave now, to serve Madame D, and to act as a spy for Qin Wanru. Second miss, I have no choice. My mother's whole family is in the hands of Duke Yong's mansion. I can only listen to Madame D. After Qing Shui finished telling the cause and effect of the matter, she cried even louder. She had been with Qin Wanru for a period of time. Although she was not Qin Wanru's henchman, judging from Qin Wanru's behavior, although she was young, she was really resourceful. Madame D and First Miss suffered setbacks again, and they did not even know that Second Miss had intervened in it. In Qing Shui's heart, Qin Wanru was no longer just a second miss of the mansion. This was also the reason why she immediately spat out everything when Qin Wanru's face darkened and threatened her a little. Of course, another important reason was that she did not believe in Madame D and Qin Yuru. Did your family buy themselves into Duke Yong's mansion? Qin Wanru asked. No, my family did not buy themselves into Duke Yong's mansion. Qing Shui shook her head repeatedly, wiped her tears, and said, my family just rented the land of Duke Yong's mansion and helped in a farm of Duke Yong's mansion. The work was easy. Since you rented the land, why don't you leave? Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said in a very low voice. Can we leave? Qing Shui was stunned and looked at Qin Wanru subconsciously, as if she wanted to get support from her. Her family was from the countryside of Jiangzhou and had not seen much of the world. When they entered the capital city, they completely followed the instructions of Duke Yong's mansion. She thought that they followed the people sent by Madame D to the capital city, and everything was done according to the instructions of Duke Yong's mansion. Of course you can leave. You just rented the land. Even if you rented the land for a long time, you just need to compensate for part of the loss. Moreover, you can leave secretly. Duke Yong's mansion will not make a big fuss to chase you. After all, you are not their servants. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Qing Shui's face, and her eyes narrowed slightly. The matter of Qing Shui's family was Qing Shui's weakness. If she did not completely solve the matter of this family, Qing Shui would not stop. Or it should be said that it was not Qing Shui who would not stop, but Madame D who would not let go of the idea of using Qing Shui to deal with her. She did not pity Qing Shui. A pitiful person must have something hateful. If she had really been plotted against by Qing Shui, who would pity her now? Qing Shui could be used by Madame D, and she could also be used by her. The sword was double-edged. If it was not used properly, it could hurt the user. I can give you a guarantee that I can take your whole family away in the future. Our mansion is buying a shop and a farm. Your parents can go to the farm to help, and if your brother is clever, he can go to the shop. Qin Wanru raised her red lips and said with a smile. She would not help Qing Shui for no reason, so there was a hidden condition. After she helped Qin Wanru, she would help her family. After being reborn, she was destined not to be the kind of person who could not bear to see a little sorrow in the world. She was just a weak girl in the boudoir. If she could not even protect herself, how could she be kind? Second Miss, you really helped me. Thank you, Second Miss. Thank you, Second Miss. Qing Shui was not stupid. Of course, she also knew that Qin Wanru would not help her for no reason. Hearing the meaning of Qin Wanru's words, she felt a heavy stone in her heart. She wiped away her tears and kowtowed to Qin Wanru with excitement. Not to mention that her parents had settled down in the farm, her brother could also enter the shop to help, which represented the intention of Qin's mansion to support her family. How could Qin Shui not be moved? This was much better than Madame D's coercion. At this time, Qin Shui sincerely wanted to kowtow to Qin Wanru a few times. Then she raised her head and said with a firm face, "Second miss, don't worry. I will go to serve Madame D and will definitely pass the news of Madame D." At this time, Madame D asked her to go back to serve. Of course, she did not really want her to serve. She must want to use her to pass some opposite news to Qin Wanru. For this, Qin Shui was very clear. So now when she showed her loyalty to Qin Wanru, she immediately mentioned this matter. "Alright, then you can go. Write a letter to me later, and I will ask someone to send it to your parents so that they can be ready at any time. As long as you ask them to leave, they will pack up overnight and follow my people." Qin Wanru arranged in a very orderly manner. "Yes, second miss, I will write it when I go back." At this point, Qin Shui was completely relieved. She kowtowed to Qin Wanru twice heavily, stood up, left the main room with red eyes, and went to her room. She was still wiping her tears along the way. Some servant girls and old maids who saw this scene were all surprised. All the servants in Jifeng Pavilion knew that Qin Shui was not favored in Jifeng Pavilion. But although she was not favored, she was rarely reprimanded. As a principal servant girl, she was almost invisible in the yard. Second miss would never call her for no reason. But at this time, it seemed that she was reprimanded. Thinking of the faint movement in the main room just now, many little servant girls felt pity for her. A good principal servant girl was reduced to a worse situation than a little servant girl like them. She was really down and out. Qin Shui returned to her room, picked up the pen and ink on the table, and wrote a letter to her father. Madame D intended to accompany and raise her as a confidante before, so she naturally asked someone to teach her how to write and recognize words. Although her writing was not very good, she could still recognize the basic words. As for her younger brother, he also knew some words since he was a child. There was only one boy in the family, so her parents cared about this son the most. "Have you finished writing?" Chu Lu pushed the door open and asked. They were still living in the same room. Whether in Jiangzhou or in the capital, the two of them could be said to be predestined. Although they did not get along very well, at least they had lived together for a period of time. Since Qin Shui gave up the idea of harming Qin Wanru, she got along well with Chu Lu. After all, they were not old. After letting go of the knot in their hearts, the two of them had a good relationship recently. But of course, this good relationship was only shown in the room. Outside, the two of them still showed a cold roommate relationship, and it was the kind of very unharmonious relationship. "I have finished writing." Qin Shui put the letter in her hand on the table to dry, looked up at Chu Lu, and seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Chu Lu was not in a very good mood, so she snorted and said bluntly, "Say what you want to say. Don't be shy. You are going to get married in the future. You can't live in your mother's house for the rest of your life. In fact, it is quite aggrieved for your big family." The two of them had a good relationship recently. It would be strange if she was in a good mood after Qin Shui left. What she said sounded a little harsh. "Sister Chu Lu, I will leave now." Qin Shui was a little sad when she said this. She really didn't want to get involved in the matter between Madame D and Qin Wanru, but she couldn't escape in the end. For a moment, she was so sad that she even wiped her tears with a handkerchief. In the past, she was always calm and composed in front of others, but today, she was inexplicably sad. Alright, don't cry. Since the other side wants you to go, then go. But remember, you only have the second miss as your master. After all, the other side is just an illusion. At that time, maybe second miss will ask you to come back. Chu Lu was a straightforward person. Although she was sad at this time, she still waved her hand and warned Qin Shui impatiently. "Don't worry, I will." Qin Shui nodded hard, folded the letter and handed it to her. She bit her lip and seemed to want to say something, but then stopped. Chu Lu grabbed the letter and said impatiently, "What is it? Just say it. Don't be so hesitant." Chapter 275. What? Is this true? Chu Lu widened her beautiful eyes and said in astonishment, unconsciously raising her voice a little. Qing Shui was so shocked that she reached out to cover her mouth and said in a low voice, "My little lady, raise your voice too. In fact, I don't know whether this is true or not. I've only heard it once, and I even heard it secretly. At that time, I was still in the farm and didn't know Second Miss. This matter is not certain, and I dare not tell Second Miss about it." Chu Lu was stunned, reached out to push Qing Shui away, and nodded hard. "Well, don't worry, I won't talk nonsense." When Qing Shui left Jifang Pavilion, only a little servant girl saw her off. This was Chu who had a good relationship with her in the past, and she was also the only one who had a good relationship with her. The rest of the people saw her pack a small package and leave with an old maid. Hearing that she was going to serve Madame D, everyone looked at her with more and more pity. In the past, it was much better to serve Madame D than to serve Second Mississippi. Even the little servant girl in Madame D's yard would be fought over by many people. But now Madame D's situation was not good. Previously, many people in Madame D's yard had been driven away, and the few left had no future. It seemed that the general did not want to lock Madame D for a while, but intended to lock her up forever. At this time, whoever had a relationship with Madame D would be unlucky. At this time, Qing Shui was asked to serve Madame D. How could she have a future in the future? Many people felt pity for her, but she had never won Qin Wanru's favor. Besides, she was indifferent, and the only person who secretly saw her off was the little servant girl Chu. After talking with Chu under the tree outside the yard for a while, Qing Shui left with the old maid who had been impatient. At the door of Madame D's Yulon Pavilion, two rough old maids were guarding there. Seeing Qing Shui coming with the old maid, they looked her up and down, asked a few ordinary questions, and waved their hands to let her in. The old maid who led the way did not go in with her. After talking with the old maid at the door with a smile, she turned and left. Qing Shui walked into the yard alone and saw that the yard was full of withered leaves. There was a thick layer of leaves under the big tree leaning against the wall. An inferior servant girl was weakly sweeping the leaves, but it seemed that she could not clean such a large piece of leaves no matter how hard she swept. Another two listless old maids were washing the pillars under the porch. They were using hot water, and the rising hot water rubbed their faces together, making them look muddled. This was completely different from the residence of Madame D that Qing Shui had seen before. The whole yard gave people a sense of lethargy and not much vitality. Seeing that someone came into the yard, both the servant girls and the old maids raised their eyes and looked at her blankly. Then they ignored her and continued to do their work. Qing Shui had no choice but to walk in alone. When she reached the corridor, before she could enter the main room, she saw the curtain lift, and a delicate little face appeared. It was also a servant girl, but Qing Shui did not know her. "Are you Qing Shui?" It was Huang Rui at the door. She looked Qing Shui up and down and asked with some pride. "Yes, I am Qing Shui." Qing Shui nodded. "Come in, Madam is waiting for you." Huang Rui loosened her hand, and the curtain fell down. She went into the door by herself. Qing Shui hesitated for a moment, reached out to lift the curtain, and walked into the room. In the room, Madame D was sitting in the middle, with Nanny Zhou standing beside her. Behind her, Hongye was massaging her shoulders. On the other side, the original two principal servant girls, Maya and Maybao, were serving her carefully. Huang Rui stepped forward, and after saluting Madame D, she also stood beside Nanny Zhou and looked at Qing Shui up and down with disdain. Qing Shui came over and knelt down to salute Madame D. She did not dare to look around, and just looked at her nose and mouth obediently. "Are you very dissatisfied with following me this time?" Madame D laughed, and her laughter was a little sharper. "I dare not. I am your servant girl." Qing Shui lowered her head and said respectfully, "I know you dare not. You are my servant girl. Don't think about following Qin Wanru." Madame D snorted coldly and gloomily. Her words made Qing Shui's body stiff. The threat in her words was obvious, which made her more afraid to move. Madame D lowered her body, reached out her hand to lift Qing Shui's face, and carefully looked at the look on Qing Shui's face. The somewhat ferocious face made Qing Shui tremble uncontrollably, and her eyes could not hide the fear. You look gentle and dignified. How can you make Qin Wanru dislike your behavior in daily life? Does she know that you are my servant? Madame D's gloomy eyes fell on Qing Shui's face, as if she wanted to peel off her skin from Qing Shui's face. Madam, I am useless. Qing Shui shivered into a ball, and the uncontrollable fear on her face was clearly reflected in Madame D's eyes, which made Madame D very satisfied. It was good that she was afraid. If she was afraid, she would not dare to betray her. She pushed her hand heavily to the side, and Qing Shui fell along with her hand. Her elbow hit the floor tiles heavily, making a clear clatter sound. Qing Shui was in so much pain that her tears fell down, but she could only bite her lips tightly, not daring to make a sound. You're really useless. I let you stay with the little bitch for so long, but you didn't even accomplish anything. What happened before? Why didn't the little bitch get involved in this matter, but Yuru? Madame D screamed. Her shrill voice spread out in the silent yard, making the two old maids guarding the door tremble involuntarily. Since Madame D was locked up, she seemed to have lost her bearing as a madam of a noble family. Such a shrill and high-pitched voice was like a shrew in the market. I don't know. I did everything according to Madame's instructions, and I don't know why it ended up like this. Qing Shui shook her head, with fear and panic in her eyes. Useless thing. Madame D raised her foot and kicked Qing Shui's leg fiercely. After venting her anger, she did not ask any more questions. Madame D and Nanny Zhou had long thought that this was completely done by Ning Kaixian. At that time, Madame D wanted to plot against Qin Wanru, and even did not hesitate to cooperate with Ning Kaixian secretly, and also hinted that she would agree with the marriage between Ning Kaixian and Di Yan. Ning Kaixian had promised Qin Yuru before, but later Ning Kaixian confronted Qin Yuru. It was not difficult for Ning Kaixian to push the blame of plotting against Qin Wanru to Qin Yuru. Thinking that this was caused by Ning Kaixian, Madame D gnashed her teeth loudly. Fortunately, that bitch was also dead, or she would not let her go. Because of Ning Caishian's conjecture, Madame D did not make things too difficult for Qing Shui. After showing off her power, Madame D coldly glanced at Huang Rui, who had an enchanting figure, and said, Qing Shui, you will live with Huang Rui in the future. She is new to the mansion and does not know the rules of the mansion. You should help her with all the things. If she is good in the future, you will definitely make your parents live better. Thank you, madam. Qing Shui said with a trembling voice. Oh, go down. Madame D waved her hand. Qing Shui struggled to get up and carefully stepped back. When she was outside the door, she reached out to wipe the cold sweat on her forehead. Knowing that she had passed the most important hurdle, she could not help but smile bitterly in her heart. If it were not for the words that Second Miss had taught her, she might not have been able to pass the door at this time. Madame D in front of her was frighteningly paranoid. She was no longer the dignified and decent general's wife at that time. Hey, come with me. Huang Rui came out from inside and waved her hand. Qing Shui hurriedly followed her. Huang Rui took her to the second room on the left, pushed open the unlatched door, and walked in first. Then she sat down on the big bed in the middle, looked Qing Shui up and down, raised her head, and said with a little pride, You are Qing Shui? The one who comes to serve me? I come to serve madam. Qing Shui looked at another much smaller bed in the room and said with a faint look in her eyes. Serve what, madam? It is enough that we serve madam. You come to serve me and find various opportunities to bring me to the general. Huang Rui said, squinting at Qing Shui with a pair of charming eyes. Her expression was as disdainful as it could be. Serve you? Qing Shui looked at Huang Rui dumbfoundedly and said, Of course you come to serve me. Do you really think that you can serve madam? Now madam doesn't need people like you to serve her. Huang Rui raised her eyes and looked her up and down again. Then she covered her nose with a handkerchief and said, From now on, you will live here and serve me in the past. If I go out, you will follow me and inquire about the general's working and resting time. You can still go out? Qing Shui became more and more surprised. The entire Yulan pavilion was grounded. Why could the woman in front of her go out of the yard? She did not know about the 2 servant girls sent by Duke Yong's mansion to serve Madame D. Why can't I go out? In 2 days, a batch of medicinal materials will come from Duke Yong's mansion. I have to go out to count them and then report to the general. I am sent by Duke Yong's old madam. Huang Rui raised her head and said arrogantly. She did not look like a girl from a good family. You go out with me. You are familiar with everything in this mansion. If you have any questions, you can ask others. If something happens, you can also block the disaster. Don't worry. After it is done, there will be a lot of benefits. Even if Madam gives less, I will give you a good reward. Although Huang Rui disdained Qin Shui, she looked relaxed and reminded her coldly. In her opinion, this condition of hers was extremely generous. Favored? That was for sure. As long as she could see Qin Huaiyong a few more times, it should not take much effort to seduce this Ningyuan army general. She was selected by Duke Yong's mansion's old madam and sent to Ningyuan army general's mansion because she was really outstanding. With her means, it was not too difficult to make a man fall in love with her. What she learned was the art of charming. Qin Shui lowered her head, which looked much more respectful and submissive. She just curled her lips secretly. It was good enough for the woman in front of her to go out, but she wanted her to follow her and serve her. It was like a dream. She was a principal maid, so she would never serve the woman in front of her on the surface. But at the moment, she would not tell her directly. She would understand it after she suffered. Thinking that Qin Shui had been won over by her, Huang Rui pointed to the small bed and said, "You sleep there. If I need anything in the future, you can get it for me. You should serve me like a master. You will be rewarded in the future." Qin Shui did not mean to disobey her at all. She answered gently without any embarrassment on her face, which made Huang Rui more satisfied. She stood up and walked to the dressing table in front of the window. She took a hairpin and handed it to Qin Shui. "Here you are. This hairpin is a reward for you. If you are obedient in the future, you will get such things." She rewarded a golden hairpin at the first meeting. She was really generous. Chapter 276. Deputy General? Qin Wanru frowned slightly and looked at Chu Lu with a gloomy look in her eyes. Her hand holding the handkerchief trembled slightly. This was the first time she heard the news of her biological father. How could she not be excited? "Yes, second miss," Qin Shui said so. She said that when she was still training in the farm, she once heard Nanny Zhou talking about this with the supervisor of the farm in private. But she didn't know if it was true, so she didn't dare to report it to you. Chu Lu reported and told her what Qin Shui had said before she left. Where did the deputy general come from? Qin Wanru took a deep breath and asked, suppressing the rolling excitement in her heart. Qin Shui said she didn't know either. She didn't even dare to say that what she heard must be true. Chu Lu shook her head. The room became silent. Qin Wanru took a deep breath and fell back. She closed her eyes and leaned against the back of the chair. Her father turned out to be a deputy general, the one who put down the rebellion. But she was an unmarried woman and couldn't see the files of the Ministry of War. Otherwise, she could directly go to see the surname and name of the deputy general. "I see. You can leave." Qin Wanru waved her hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Yes, miss." Chu Lu knew that Qin Wanru was confused at this time, so she carefully retreated. When standing at the door, she looked at Qin Wanru with concern. Yu Jie waved at her to let her rest assured. Then Chu Lu retreated to the door. Seeing that it was still early outside, she reached out to touch Qin Shui's letter in her arms and strode out. She still had the task of sending letters home for Qin Shui. "Miss." Seeing that Qin Wanru had been silent, Yu Jie seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. "Yu Jie, do you know where your parents are?" Qin Wanru didn't open her eyes and just said in a low and slow voice. Her voice was not high, but it was extremely heavy. "Miss, my biological mother and father died early. I am an orphan." Yu Jie's eyes turned red. If Mingqiu Nun hadn't adopted her, she would have died in the mountain early. For Mingqiu Nun, she not only had a teacher-apprentice relationship, but also had a kind of admiration for her. Was Yu Jie an orphan? Qin Wanru smiled bitterly. Wasn't she the same? She was even worse than Yujie. She didn't even know who her biological parents were. How could she bear it? He clasped his hands together as if that was the only way to give himself strength. There was a dull pain in his heart. Where are they? Are you still there? He was almost talking to himself, but the sadness in his words made Yujie's eyes turn a little red. She deliberately turned around to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes and changed the sad topic. Miss, why didn't the general react to the news you released earlier? Why didn't Madame Dowager explain anything either? With the help of the rumor, Qin Wanru not only solved the problem of Madame of Duke Xing forcing her to be her adopted daughter, but also spread the rumor that she was not the daughter of lineal descent of Qin's mansion. However, it had been a few days, and Qin Huaiyong and old grandma seemed to have no intention of explaining to her, as if they had not heard the rumors outside. Miss, could you have made a mistake? Yujie felt a little confused. In this case, shouldn't Madame Dowager or the general come forward to talk to second miss? Why didn't they respond? It seemed that nothing had happened. Then let's wait first. Qin Wanru restrained the sadness in her eyes, and her eyes became cold. With the memory of her last life, she certainly wouldn't think that her idea was wrong. Some clues at the moment also confirmed this point again and again. She even guessed some answers that shocked her, but it was just a guess. There were some things she really couldn't figure out. The reactions of Qin Huaiyong and Madame Dowager were also within her expectation. If it could be so simple, they wouldn't hide it from her for a whole life in her last life. But she was determined. If one thing couldn't shake them, then she would do 2 things. If 2 things couldn't shake them, then she would do 10 things. She didn't believe that this thing would always be hidden. In a while, ask Nanny Yu and Wang Feng to help Nanny Dong. I'm afraid that she'll be too busy for a while. Some things that are needed can't be obtained easily. If it's in the mansion, tell my mother directly and take it first. Thinking of tomorrow's matter, Qin Wanru ordered in a low voice. Yes, miss, I'll talk to Nanny Yu about it later. Seeing that Qin Wanru was no longer sad and restored her former calmness, Yujie relaxed and said with a smile. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to Tang Chenyan in front of the window, and sighed in a low voice. This Tang Chenyan was really disappointing. He didn't look like a flower that could bloom. It seemed that it was good enough for him to live like this. Picking up the scissors at hand, she thought for a while and trimmed the extra branches. Tomorrow Prince Chen might not be satisfied, but no matter what, she had to trim it well, in case he found that she didn't take care of it well. Miss, let me help you cut it. Yujie looked at the big scissors in Qin Wanru's hand and said worriedly. No, I'll do it myself. Qin Wanru shook her head. That prince was not so easy to fool, so it was better to do it by herself to make sure. The next day, Qin Wanru went out with the excuse that Butterfly Clothing Shop was going to officially open, and she, as the owner, had to be there to take a good look. Of course, Qin Wanru just watched from a distance. Knowing that Qin Wanru's Butterfly Clothing Shop was going to officially open, Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin were also quite surprised. Originally, they thought that Qin Wanru was just playing around, but they didn't expect that she really opened a shop, and she was not slow. The shops that Qin's mansion wanted to buy were not many, but Qin Wanru's shop was really not slow. Knowing that she was worried about her shop, Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin told her a few more words and let her go out. When Qin Wanru got on the carriage, the pot of Tang Chenyan had already been put in the carriage. The carriage went out from the side door and then went to the main road. After a few turns along the way, it didn't take long for them to arrive at the door of Butterfly Clothing Shop. This place was particularly lively today. Nanny Dong had prepared well, and she specially invited an opera troupe to sing at the door. At this time, they were singing happily, which made people passing by applaud loudly. The stage was not big and it was just at the door. There were not many people singing on it, but fortunately, their singing skills were good, and they looked gentle and beautiful, which was quite amazing. Sitting in the carriage, Qin Wanru lifted the curtain and looked around. She saw Nanny Dong running to greet the guests with a smile. Although she was busy sweating, she always had a smile on her face, and it seemed that she was in a good mood. A shop assistant took firecrackers and set them off, which immediately became more and more lively. The passers-by all stopped to look at the shop's name. Whenever a woman passed by, she would go in to take a look and see what was being sold inside. Soon, she would come out with some clothes and accessories. Her face was full of smiles, and she seemed very satisfied with what she had seen. The opening discount was also an idea that Nanny Dong and Chin Wonru thought of today. Today was the auspicious opening, and all goods would be discounted. This was also an important reason why the women left happily. For a time, the shop was crowded with people. Chin Wonru was also very satisfied. Nanny Dong was really a capable person. It had only been a short time, but she had arranged things so well. It seemed that the future income of her shop should be good. She had just seen a miss from an aristocratic family entering the shop. From her position through the window, she could see the door of the shop clearly. Suddenly, she pulled hard with her hand, and the curtain in her hand made a crisp sound, as if it was about to be pulled apart. "Miss!" Yujia looked back in astonishment, and she was also looking at the other side of the window. "I seem to see an acquaintance." Chin Wonru's eyes searched in the crowd. At that moment, she seemed to see a person who should not have appeared in the capital city. Was her eyesight dazzled? Seeing that Chin Wonru was looking for someone eagerly, Yujia also looked around, but she didn't find anyone she knew. She couldn't help but turn back and ask Chin Wonru, "Miss, who did you see? Why didn't I see him?" Chin Wonru frowned. She didn't know whether she really saw him or not, and she couldn't tell the reason for a while. She just frowned. The carriage suddenly moved. Although it was not a big movement, she could still clearly feel that the carriage was moving forward. "What's going on? Miss, you still want to watch for a while?" Yujia said to the coachman outside in surprise. "Second, miss, I can't help it. The carriage is hooked to the carriage in front." The coachman's voice came from outside. "Hooked?" Chin Wonru said in surprise. The carriage was still moving forward, but it was still stable. Yujia reached out to lift the curtain and glared at the opposite carriage. The crowd was so crowded that some carriages were squeezed together. There was a large carriage in front of their carriage without any sign, but a hook at the back of this carriage hooked the shaft of Chin Wonru's carriage. The coachman sitting on the shaft raised the whip helplessly, but he didn't dare to let it fall in the end. It was too noisy here, and there were so many people squeezing here and there that it was impossible to avoid it. He could only let the carriage slowly move forward with the carriage in front. Seeing this clearly, Yujia was about to get out of the carriage and wanted to take the hook off, but she stopped when she saw a face sticking out of the window in front. Looking back at Chin Wonru, who was still at a loss, Yujia helplessly turned back, put down the curtain in her hand, and blocked the view from the outside. "Miss, I saw Xiao Xuanzi in the carriage in front," Yujia said helplessly. Today her master was invited to go out, of course, she knew, but she didn't expect that Prince Chen would invite her master in such a way. Yujia thought that this prince was really good at making trouble. Tell the coachman not to panic and just follow them. Although Chin Wonru was also surprised by Chu Chenliu's action, she could only say helplessly. Yujia nodded, lifted the curtain again, glanced at Xiao Xuanzi, who looked over from the window in front with a smile, and whispered to the coachman to follow them. Chapter 277. The flower market in the capital city was very busy recently, but it was crowded because of the people. The good gardeners were basically invited away because of the seeds of Tang Chenyan. The rest were just ordinary gardeners. But it didn't prevent the whole flower market from being very busy. Chin Wonru came down from the carriage with a curtain hat and walked behind rows of flower pots. There were not many flowers in bloom at this time, and most of them were Tang Chenyan, which were late blooming. But no matter which flower pot, they all bloomed well. Chin Wonru, who came to the flower market for the first time, looked at them with great interest and walked to the depth of the flower market. In the depth of the flower market, there were fewer and fewer people. The big potted plants were mainly trees, which blocked the people on the opposite side. "Miss, this tree is good and looks good." Yujia pointed at a potted plant and her eyes lit up. She thought for a while and added, "It looks like the ones at the gate of Jingshin Monastery." Hearing what she said, Chin Wonru smiled sweetly. The trees at the gate of Jingshin Monastery were indeed similar to this potted plant. The pine trees at the gate of Jingxin Monastery have long been cut down. Chu Luchen came out from behind a big potted plant and said in a lazy and gentle voice. Qin Wanru stepped forward and bowed to him, "Your Highness. This is the Tang Chenyan you raised? Qin Wanru, you really know how to raise flowers." Chu Liuchen's eyes turned to the Tang Chenyan in Yuji's hands. "I just arrived in the capital city, and I'm not used to the climate here." Qin Wanru laughed dryly and turned her watery eyes to the pot of Tang Chenyan. Looking at the beautiful Tang Chenyan along the way, Qin Wanru really felt that her pot of Tang Chenyan could only be described as still alive. Even the leaves on the tree were sparse. "You are not used to the climate here, but this pot of Tang Chenyan, which should grow in the capital city, is not used to the climate here?" Chu Luchen touched his chin thoughtfully and said with a faint smile. Qin Wanru blushed and bit her lips. It was really hard to answer. Could she say that Chu Liuchen's pot of Tang Chenyan was not good? "Your Highness, why were the pine trees at the gate of Jingxin Monastery cut down?" Yujie came over with the Tang Chenyan in her arms, bowed to Chu Luchen and said anxiously. She was not too clear about what happened in Jingxin Monastery. "I was framed. It's good enough that I didn't kill him," Chu Luchen said casually. Qin Wanru's face changed dramatically. "Then, what happened to the people inside? Since I've promised you I'm fine. Don't you trust me?" Chu Liuchen's face darkened, and his eyes turned cold immediately. It seemed that Qin Wanru was dazzled by the feeling of spring breeze before. "Thank you, Your Highness." Qin Wanru reacted very quickly. She lowered her body and saluted sideways, for fear that this man would put on airs again. It was not easy to control his mood. "What about my Tang Chenyan?" Chu Luchen asked in an unfriendly tone. His handsome eyes glanced at Qin Wanru's face, which made her feel inexplicably terrified. "Your Highness can do whatever you want." Qin Wanru cried bitterly in her heart. It seemed that Chu Luchen did come to negotiate with her, but she would only lose if she negotiated with Chu Luchen. "Qin Wanru, I remember that you've traded with me many times. Now you must owe me a lot." Chu Luchen looked at her with his eyes tilted, and suddenly smiled. "Yes. In this case, Qin Wanru could only brace herself to do it. Since this is the case, it's time for you to pay me back." Chu Luchen suddenly smiled. His light-colored lips were raised, with a touch of elegance and beauty like ink. It was as light as a flower, but when tasted carefully, it felt strong and cold. It was like a pool of unclear deep water that could suck people's souls and kill them. "Your Highness, I'm at your command." Qin Wanru felt cold on her back, but she had to agree. She clenched her hands and her sleeves tightly, waiting for Chu Liuchen's command. She should have expected this moment. No matter how shocked she was, she instantly realized that Chu Luchen was never the harmless boy he looked like on the surface. The so-called handsome boy who walked out of an ink painting was just one of the appearances he gave to the world, and it was just one of his many appearances. What an honest child. Chu Liuchen's eyes were shining, and he casually praised. A sip and a peck. Perhaps he did not think so much when he reached out, but now he felt that this was a good thing. Honest people were indeed reassuring. Look, he only brought up a pot of Tang Chenyan and he admitted to it. This saved him a lot of trouble and prevented him from stirring up trouble again. He would never let go of what he wanted. "Your Highness, thank you for your praise." Qin Wanru fluttered her long eyelashes and said, "In fact, it's very simple. Imperial grandmother wants to choose a wife for me, but I don't want those women, so." Chu Liuchen's eyes fell on Qin Wanru, and Qin Wanru felt cold on her back. "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and suppressed the throbbing in her heart. She looked at Chu Luchen with her bright watery eyes, but her brain was spinning rapidly. In the last life, Chu Luchen didn't seem to have a wife, and no one heard about his wedding. It seemed that everyone forgot about his marriage, including the Empress Dowager who was said to love him very much, and the Emperor who was said to grant all his requests. So it didn't happen in the last life, but why would it happen in this life? Could it be that because of his rebirth, some things had changed? This king's meaning is very simple. In order to avoid those troubles, you should become this king's fiancé. Look at you now. I reckon that you can only become this king's fiancé. Coincidentally, this king also doesn't want to get married. Chu Luchun looked up and down Qin Wanru's small body with disgust, and smacked his lips. Your Highness, why do you want to be my fiancé if you don't want to get married? With your ability, it shouldn't be a difficult thing, right? Qin Wanru looked directly at Chu Liuchun's handsome face, and said while biting her red lips. She really didn't believe that Chu Luchun couldn't refuse her. How he refused in the previous life, he would still refuse in this life. If he didn't want to marry a wife, would the Empress Dowager and the Emperor force him? At first glance, it was obvious that he couldn't be forced. If it was before, Imperial grandmother might listen to me, but now. I fainted again that day, and Xiao Xuanzi didn't take good care of me. Imperial grandmother was furious and ordered people to reorganize my Prince Chen's mansion, and even Xiao Xuanzi was beaten. Chu Luchun didn't seem surprised by Qin Wanru's question, and said leisurely. Second miss, I was really beaten, and I still can't sit down. Xiao Xuanzi nodded on the side, and said with a bitter face. Looking at his pale face and haggard look, he really seemed to be beaten. Your Highness fainted? Qin Wanru widened her watery eyes and asked, looking Chu Luchun up and down. She didn't know if she was wrong, but she didn't think this prince's health was so bad. Of course I fainted, and I fainted in front of an imperial physician that Imperial grandmother found for me. I heard that this imperial physician was found by Duke Xing for Imperial grandmother, and he could be regarded as a miracle-working physician found in the south of the Yangtze River. But he was useless. He only said that with my health. I was afraid that I couldn't live for a few years. Chu Luchun curled his lips into a smile as if he was talking about someone else's business. His handsome face did not change at all, and he even narrowed his beautiful eyes, looking very indifferent. Your Highness's health. Qin Wanru bit her lips and asked. I know my health well. Don't worry, it's just an engagement. If I die, I will ask Imperial grandmother to break the engagement between us, and you will be free. Chu Luchun looked at Qin Wanru with a strange look and smiled coldly. The degree of malice immediately formed a sharp contrast with the indifference he showed before. The dignity and coldness hidden in his smile made Qin Wanru complain secretly. It doesn't matter. Anyway, for me, it doesn't matter whether I get married or not. Qin Wanru said what was in her heart helplessly. In this life, she really didn't care about getting married. In the last life, she broke off the engagement again and again, which made her have an inexplicable fear in her heart. Deep in her heart, she actually didn't want to get married. In her heart, she had also imagined that if it was really as she guessed, she could persuade her elders in the end, and finally set up a family alone. It was not impossible to set up a family as a woman. Or if it didn't work, she could go to a place like Jingxin Monastery. When everything was settled, she could spend the rest of her life in that quiet place. Now this marriage was used by Chu Luchun to calculate, but she actually didn't care. Originally, this was to make up for the lack of a deal between them. This was actually very fair, wasn't it? You don't want to get married? That's good. I don't want to get married either. Then we can be a couple for the time being. When I come back, I will definitely set you free. Chu Luchun said playfully, and his smile immediately turned from cloudy to sunny. At this moment, he actually made people feel that he was as beautiful as jade, and his child was unparalleled in the world. Qin Wanru opened a pair of watery eyes and sighed in her heart that this child was really deceiving. In this world, only colorful poisonous snakes could have so many colors. It's up to child. Qin Wanru nodded and said. After thinking for a while, she kindly added, if child has a girl you like in the future, you don't have to worry about me. You can break off the engagement at any time. Qin Wanru didn't care about what Chu Luchun said about getting married. After all, this child had been living well in the last life. Chu Luchun looked at her, and suddenly raised the corner of his handsome lips meaningfully. With a strange smile, he said, Qin Wanru, you are very good. If it's done, I will write off the previous debts with you, and even promise you that I will try my best to help you in the future. But now it's not done, and you still have to rely on yourself. Chapter 278. At the palace banquet, Imperial grandmother will observe you. You have to show some affection for me. Chu Luchen said softly. This is not in accordance with women's etiquette. Qin Wanru raised her little face and refused. She could promise to be Chu Liuchen's shield, but she didn't want to ruin her reputation. In her last life, it was because of her ruined reputation that a series of things happened. I don't need you to do much. Don't you have medical skills? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and smiled. Medical skills? Qin Wanru's heart moved. She looked at Chu Luchen carefully, trying to find something from his eyes. Unfortunately, he was a fox. She couldn't see what he was thinking from his fickle face. I'm not in good health. It's normal for you to observe me more. After all, you have medical skills. Chu Luchen said patiently. This. Qin Wanru hesitated. It was not so easy to play tricks in the palace, not to mention that it was Chu Liuchen's wife. Qin Wanru, you promised me just now. Seeing her hesitation, Chu Liuchen's smile immediately became cold. His handsome face showed a deep and gloomy look. He patted on a bonsai of Korean pine and reminded Qin Wanru, when we were in Jingxin Monastery in Jiangzhou, it was I who caught the coachman for you. If you don't want to, after you walk out of here, we will no longer contact each other. Although the bonsai of Korean pine was not big, it could not be broken into so many pieces by ordinary people. The threat in it was obvious. Your Highness, I'll agree. Qin Wanru looked at Chu Luchen, who looked sick and weak in astonishment. Her mind rolled a little. This time, she didn't hesitate anymore and bit her red lips. Since she had been involved in the game, she couldn't quit even if she wanted to. Or even if she didn't get involved in the game, she would end up with her head in different places in her last life. It could be seen that some things couldn't be avoided just by hiding. Since he couldn't hide and couldn't hide, then he wouldn't hide anymore. As someone who had crawled out of the blood river hell, he naturally had a ruthless nature. At this moment, a trace of gloominess and viciousness appeared on her delicate little face. That's good. Qin Wanru, I don't want you to be beaten back before you show up. You should understand what this king means, right? Chu Luchen raised his long and narrow eyes and said meaningfully. His handsome face became more and more enchanting, but it was obvious that he was in a good mood. Qin Wanru didn't answer immediately. After thinking for a while, she looked up at Chu Luchen and said, Child, I can be your shield, but I also hope that you can help me. Sometimes, the more she investigated, the more frightened she felt. The more she investigated, the more she felt that it was impossible to continue investigating. But no matter what, she had a reason to continue investigating. The hatred of 2 lifetimes should be paid with blood. What do you want? Chu Luchen didn't seem to be surprised by Qin Wanru's words. He tilted his head and smiled gently. He looked like a romantic young man, but his eyes were cold. I want those who hurt me to fall into hell. Qin Wanru looked at Chu Luchen without dodging and said word by word. A trace of blood flashed in her deep eyes. She clenched her fists fiercely, and there was a faint bloodthirsty aura coming from her body. She knew what she wanted. It might not only be her hatred, but also the hatred of her parents. If her guess was true, she might have to fight against Duke Xing's mansion, and Qin's mansion was too small in front of the whole Duke Xing's mansion. In the last life, her parents and she helped others achieve fame and wealth. In this life, it was time for them to pay back. Even if she had to pay with her life, she also wanted to borrow the monstrous power from Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen looked at her with interest with his handsome eyes. He suddenly laughed and reached out to rub her hair. Although she had grown taller recently, she was still a lot shorter than Chu Luchen. He seemed to grow very fast recently and was still much taller than Qin Wanru. He reached out his hand and could just rub her hair. Good, Qin Wanru, you are really good. The coldness on Qin Wanru's face faded away. Her eyes were shining, and her smile was beautiful and gentle. She looked small and slim, but her momentum was not suppressed by Chu Luchen. Yu Jie even faintly felt that they were very compatible. She carefully looked at Xiao Xuanzi beside her and saw that he was looking at Chu Luchen excitedly. She could only suppress the doubts in her heart for a moment. Why did she feel that her miss was completely willing to cut off all means of retreat for this so-called purpose? Qin Wanru didn't stay in the flower market for a long time. Later, she found a gardener and asked some ways to raise Tang Qianyan and what to pay attention to. The gardener told her one by one and also found several suitable ways for her Tang Qianyan. He even repeatedly said that her Tang Qianyan was indeed a rare treasure. Qin Wanru helplessly asked Yujie to take the Tang Qianyan back. In fact, she wanted to leave this pot of flower here, but Chu Luchen asked her to take it away. Seeing Qin Wanru and her servant leaving, Xiao Xuanzi secretly looked at his master's face. He looked gentle and casually stopped among the flowers with his hands behind his back. It seemed that he was in a very good mood. Xiao Xuanzi carefully said, "Prince, didn't you say that you don't need to get engaged now? Empress Dowager also agreed with you." "That's just a casual remark, grandmother." Chu Luchen smiled gently and stood in front of a pot of Tang Qianyan. He stretched out his slender hand and gently touched a beautiful flower in full bloom on it, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. "Prince, do you mean that Emperor and Empress Dowager will arrange a marriage for you without your consent?" Xiao Xuanzi didn't understand and touched his head and said, "Of course Imperial Grandmother will arrange a marriage for me with my consent." Chu Luchen was in a good mood today, and he was willing to explain to Xiao Xuanzi. He elegantly touched the flower again and said, "Imperial Grandmother will not ignore my intention, but this does not prevent her from secretly choosing for me. If she likes someone, she will take more care of me." Does she mean to let Empress Dowager take more care of Second Miss? Xiao Xuanzi felt that he couldn't keep up with his master's rhythm. "Of course I don't mean to let Imperial Grandmother take more care of Qin Wanru. But if Imperial Grandmother likes Qin Wanru and feels that she is sincere to me, she will naturally think highly of Qin Wanru. There are many people in the palace who live by the master's face. Moreover, of course I can't let others choose my people." Chu Luchen walked to another pot of Tang Qianyan and said leisurely, "This girl was so interesting, of course he wouldn't let others choose her." "Prince, do you mean to marry Second Miss Qin or pretend to marry Second Miss Qin?" Xiao Xuanzi rolled his eyes and felt that he still couldn't understand what his master said. So he simply bypassed all the twists and turns and went straight to the center. "So what if I marry her or pretend to marry her? I don't know when I will lose my body." Chu Luchen snorted coldly. His warm face immediately changed and his eyes became cold. "Prince, your body will be fine." Xiao Xuanzi was anxious. "In fact, it really doesn't matter whether I will be fine or not." Chu Luchen coughed in a low voice. The smile on his face immediately became more and more pale. He reached out to help Xiao Xuanzi and seemed to be about to fall. Xiao Xuanzi was shocked and hurriedly shouted to the outside, come on, help my master, and you will be rewarded." There were many people in the flower market, but most of them were outside. At this time, hearing Xiao Xuanzi's shout, several people immediately came to help Xiao Xuanzi to help Chu Luchen. Although these people didn't know Chu Luchen, they immediately knew that he was not an ordinary person when they saw Chu Liuchen's luxurious clothes, brocade robe, and jade crown. They hurriedly helped Xiao Xuanzi to help him get on the carriage. Xiao Xuanzi thanked them profusely and took the money to reward them. Then he hung the curtain and hurriedly asked the coachman to go back. This wave of noise was not small, which attracted pedestrians to stop and watch. Qin Wanru and Yujie actually didn't walk far. Hearing the noise here, they also stopped. Then they saw several people help Chu Luchen to get on the carriage, and then the carriage rushed away. It seemed that the situation was not very good. "Miss, is Prince Chen's health really so poor?" Yujie asked in confusion. Although she didn't directly take Prince Chen's pulse, she didn't feel it for him. Every time she saw him, he didn't look so sick. He is indeed sick. Qin Wanru shook her head with a bitter smile. Chu Luchen should be sick, and it was a very serious kind. But she really didn't know why Chu Luchen sometimes didn't look sick and weak. Of course, when he was in front of others, he was used to being sick and weak. Thinking that he just said that he suddenly fainted in the palace, and some miracle-working doctor from Jiangnan became an imperial physician and came to see his illness. From this point of view, Chu Liuchen's illness was real. As for why he was sometimes good and sometimes bad, it was not clear. The carriage of Qin's mansion stopped at the place where Chu Liuchen's carriage stopped just now. The two carriages were almost parked side by side, and Chu Liuchen's carriage was also blocked outside. At this time, when his carriage left, it was much more convenient for Qin Wanru's carriage to drive back. Yu Jie helped Qin Wanru get on the carriage, and then Qin Wanru got on the carriage. The carriage turned around and went to Butterfly Clothing Shop. When arriving at Butterfly Clothing Shop, Qin Wanru deliberately asked the carriage to stop for a while. The bustle just now had passed. There were broken firecrackers at the door of Butterfly Clothing Shop, and other things were no different from ordinary shops. Seeing that the passenger flow was not bad, Qin Wanru also felt relieved. She asked the coachman to start again and go directly back to Qin's mansion. When she got off the carriage from the side door, she saw another carriage parked on the side, which didn't look like the carriage of Qin's mansion. "Which mansion do you come from?" Seeing Qin Wanru's attention on this carriage, Yu Jie very cleverly went forward to pull an old maid who was passing by and said, "Duke Xing's mansion sent gifts." The old maid said with a smile, "Gifts? To?" Yu Jie was stunned and said, "Of course to first Miss Qi, but just now they also asked about second Mississippi. Maybe they will send gifts to second Miss later." The old maid smiled and went forward to salute Qin Wanru. Chapter 279. Qin Wanru was stopped by Qi Rongji aggressively in the garden. "Qin Wanru, I am now the adopted daughter of Madam of Duke Xing and the Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. How dare you show off in front of Madam of Duke Xing and ask her to give you gifts again and again?" Qin Wanru stopped and raised her beautiful eyebrows calmly. She smiled indifferently and coldly. "First Miss Qi, this is still our mansion, right?" "What do you mean?" Qi Rongji was stunned and didn't understand. "Since this is still our mansion, not Duke Xing's mansion, I don't know why First Miss Qi is so confident to yell and scold me here." Qin Wanru smiled coldly and glanced at her calmly. Such a look and such a behavior made Qi Rongji so angry that she almost exploded. She reached out to point at Qin Wanru and said with a red face, "Qin Wanru, look clearly at my identity and what is your identity?" "First Miss Qi, please tell me what is my identity and what is your identity? You are just a simple title and there is not even a formal ceremony to recognize your so-called adopted daughter. First Miss Qi, are you very proud of yourself?" Qin Wanru's eyes became calmer and calmer. She looked Qi Rongji up and down. Although there was no disdain on her face, the meaning of her words made Qi Rongji want to rush over and slap Qin Wanru hard. "Qin Wanru, you are so uneducated." Qi Rongji gritted her teeth and said, "I am uneducated? First Miss Qi, is this what you mean?" Qin Wanru said lightly, "Yes, you are an uneducated bastard. You are just a bastard picked up from the streets. Do you really think you are the daughter of General's mansion?" Qi Rongji was so angry that she almost fainted because of Qin Wanru's contemptuous attitude. She opened her mouth and shouted angrily, "I am picked up from the streets?" Qin Wanru sneered and said, "First Miss Qi, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I'm not talking nonsense. You are picked up from the streets. Madam D told my mother before. At that time, many madams heard it, but my mother was not the only one." Qi Rongji argued with a flushed face. She had used this matter to successfully make Madam of Duke Xing change Qin Wanru from her adopted daughter to her own. She felt that she had something on Qin Wanru. At this time, being provoked by Qin Wanru, she immediately brought up this matter to talk about. "Since Miss Qi dared to say it, you should admit it. Come, let's go to see father now. Do you dare to say it again in front of father?" Qin Wanru stepped forward, grabbed Qi Rongji's hand, and was about to take her to see Qin Huaiyong. Hearing that she was going to see Qin Huaiyong, Qi Rongji's momentum immediately disappeared and she panicked. She pushed Qin Wanru's hand away and bluffed, "I'm not afraid to tell your father. I'll go after I get the evidence from my mother." "You have proof? What evidence?" Qin Wanru asked in astonishment. "Of course I have the evidence to prove that you are not General Qin's daughter. You are a bastard picked up." Qi Rongji felt guilty, but her voice became louder and louder. She glared at Qin Wanru and bluffed, as if her mother really had the evidence of Qin Wanru. First, Miss Qi, please remember what you've said today. If you can't prove anything, you'd better stay away from me in the future. Whenever I'm around, you have to stay away, otherwise. Qin Wanru lowered her voice and stared at Qi Rongji coldly. Her lips curled up, revealing her snow-white teeth, giving off a ghastly aura. Qi Rongji subconsciously took 2 steps back, and her momentum just disappeared. She stammered and wanted to say a few words to save face, but Qin Wanru smiled disdainfully. With a smile, she took Yu Jie and walked forward without paying any attention to her. When Qin Wanru walked past her, Qi Rongji came to her senses. But it would be a little embarrassing to catch up with them. In addition, she was the weaker party when facing Qin Wanru just now, so she did not dare to catch up with them. Miss, let's go back first. Just now the supervisor of Duke Xing's mansion said that there will be something for you later. Chun Yi came forward and whispered. She knew better than Qi Rongji that this was Qin's mansion, so she did not dare to be arrogant in Qin's mansion. Although it was a good thing that her master now had a close relationship with Duke Xing's mansion, Madame of Duke Xing obviously didn't take her master seriously. She just sent some gifts to let them move to Duke Xing's mansion. But after such a long time, she didn't say a word to them. Today, she mainly came to send gifts to second Miss Qin. As a clever servant girl, how could she not see it? If her miss continued to be so arrogant, she would not be able to enter Duke Xing's mansion, and even be unable to stay in Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Humph, little bitch. Qi Rongji stared at Qin Wanru's back with hatred and scolded in a low voice. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She felt that the reason why Madame of Duke Xing looked up to Qin Wanru was that Qin Wanru deliberately flattered Madame of Duke Xing. Now she was the adopted daughter of Madame of Duke Xing. How could Qin Wanru compete with her for Madame of Duke Xing's favor? Thinking of this, she could not help but come to Qin Wanru. Hearing that Qin Wanru went out, she waited for her in the garden. Unexpectedly, she did not get to vent her anger, but got angry again. She could not swallow this anger for a while. Chun Yi, has mother's letter come? She did send a letter to the wife of the magistrate of Jiangzhou, asking about Qin Wanru's family background. She thought that her mother had evidence, but before she came to the capital city, her mother did not mention a word to her. She must trample on Qin Wanru and see how she could be arrogant in front of her in the future. Miss, this thing? I am afraid Madame also heard it. Chun Yi persuaded in a low voice. It must be true. Qi Rongji was not a person who could be easily persuaded, so she gritted her teeth and said with hatred, Miss, what if Madame writes a letter saying that there is no evidence? Seeing that Qi Rongji was so stubborn, Chun Yi said anxiously, No evidence? Qi Rongji sneered and looked back at a corner not far away. Even if mother has no evidence, Qin Yuru must have some, right? Just now, she thought of another idea. In this mansion, she was not the only one who wanted Qin Wanru dead. Qin Yuru also wanted to trample Qin Wanru to death now. Let's go and see first Miss Qin. After thinking it through, Qi Rongji's face eased a little, and she turned to go to Qin Yuru's courtyard. First Miss Qin is locked up. It is not good for you to go in like this, is it? Chun Yi ran 2 steps to catch up with her. Why not? I am just going to see Qin Yuru. In the past, when we were in Jiangzhou, our relationship has always been good. Now that she is being punished, I am going to see her and help her copy a few women's precepts. This is also our sisterhood. Qi Rongji sneered. At this time, she had even thought of a reason. Being provoked by Qin Wanru, the resentment in her heart burned so fiercely that she had to spit out this poisonous fire. Qin Wanru, this little bitch, dared to step on her head. Qin Wanru went to old Madame's Xining Pavilion. When she arrived at Xining Pavilion, Madame Dowager was talking in the room. The servant girl lifted the curtain, and Qin Wanru went in. She saw Nanny Sheng, who served Madame of Duke Xing, and Madame Dowager were talking happily with smiles on their faces. They looked like they were in a good mood. Seeing Qin Wanru come in, Nanny Sheng hurried over and bowed to Qin Wanru. Second Miss, our madam sent me to see you again. Thank you, Nanny Sheng. Qin Wanru bowed sideways slightly. Of course, this bow was not to Nanny Sheng, but to Madame of Duke Xing behind Nanny Sheng. Hearing that second miss is going to attend the palace banquet, our madam is very happy, and specially asked me to send you a gift. Nanny Sheng said with a smile, and reached out to point at a box on the table. A servant girl went over to open it, and immediately a pair of clear jade bracelets appeared in the box. This pair of jade bracelets is given by our madam to Second Mississippi. Second Miss is going to enter the palace, and you will meet many nobles. It is very good to dress up beautifully. At this kind of palace banquet, misses are the most exquisite dressed. This, how dare I accept it? Looking at the clear material of the jade bracelets, Qin Wanru knew that this pair of jade bracelets was very valuable, and immediately shook her head to refuse. Zhuozhua, accept it. It is a kind gift from Madame of Duke Xing. Madame Dowager suddenly said with a smile. A trace of deepness flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes. Madame Dowager had never been a short-sighted person, and it was impossible for her to accept such a valuable gift for no reason, especially now the gift was given by Madame of Duke Xing. Since the last incident, although Qin's mansion did not do anything to Nanny Xing, Qin Huaiyong and Madame Dowager should know that Madame of Duke Xing did not come with good intentions. In this case, how could Madame Dowager allow her to accept it? Although she thought so in her heart, she did not show it on her face. She turned sideways and bowed to Madame Dowager and said softly, "Yes, Grandma." Seeing that Qin Wanru accepted the gift, Nanny Sheng smiled more brightly. She waved her hand, and the servant girl closed the box again. "Madame Dowager, I have to trouble Second Miss with this matter," Nanny Sheng said meaningfully. "In fact, it is not a trouble, but I have to thank Madame of Duke Xing." Madame Dowager said politely. "Madame Dowager, you are too polite. Since it is settled, I will go back first. Our madam is still waiting in the mansion." Seeing that everything was done, Nanny Sheng said goodbye to Madame Dowager. Madame Dowager smiled and asked Nanny Duan to see her off. The two clever people went out one after the other. After Nanny Sheng left, Madame Dowager waved to Qin Wanru intimately, and Qin Wanru came forward. Madame Dowager took Qin Wanru's hand and motioned her to sit down beside her, and then said slowly, "Zhuozhua, are you very surprised that Grandma asked you to accept Madame of Duke Xing's gift?" Qin Wanru nodded, and her long eyelashes fluttered twice. Although she did not ask, her tender white face was full of doubts, and it could be seen that she was really confused. Chapter 280. I have to accept this gift. Madame Dowager sighed, and the smile on her face slowly faded. I also know what Madame of Duke Xing did before. It seems that she has colluded with that side and wants to deal with your mother and you. I don't know how that side is hooked up with this madam. Madame Dowager looked a little cold. No one was stupid. Madame Dowager had seen what Nanny Xing did that day and the people from Shui Ruolin's ex-husband's family that Qin Huaiyong found later. How could she not understand that Madame of Duke Xing came with evil intentions? She was also very wary of Madame of Duke Xing. Even if Nanny Xing came to send gifts today, Madame Dowager did not intend to accept it since she knew it. She was not sure what Madame of Duke Xing could do for Madame D. "Then why did you accept this pair of bracelets, Grandma?" Qin Wanru curiously watched Yu Jie take the box and look at the pair of bracelets on it and said, just looking at it from a distance, she only knew that the bracelets were expensive. But looking at them carefully, she found that they were different from ordinary bracelets. The gold ornaments on the outside of the bracelets were made in a simple style, and the two rubies on it made the bracelets brighter and more colorful. At first glance, such a pair of bracelets did not seem to be custom-made, but seemed to be handed down from the ancestors. These bracelets belong to the ancestors of our Qin's mansion. At that time, your grandfather had an accident and your father was still young. I had no choice but to buy the family property to save your grandfather. These bracelets were sold at that time. For this reason, I knelt in front of the ancestral tablets for a whole night, begging for the forgiveness of the ancestors. But in the end, although I spent a lot of money, your grandfather still. Speaking of this, Madame Dowager felt sad and her eyes turned red. She put down Qin Wanru's hand and picked up a handkerchief to wipe her tears. Grandma, How did this pair of bracelets end up in the hands of Madame of Duke Xing? Qin Wanru comforted Madame Dowager's other hand and asked softly. I don't know why they are in the hands of Madame of Duke Xing. At that time, the family I sold them to raise money was not Duke Xing's mansion. Madame Dowager shook her head and said, Then, what does Madame of Duke Xing want me to do to send this pair of bracelets here? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the pair of conspicuous bracelets, and she felt inexplicably familiar with them. She reached out and gently rubbed the space between her eyebrows, blinked a few times, and asked. It seemed that she had seen this pair of bracelets in her last life. But she just couldn't remember. She just felt that he looked familiar. This was a bracelet that had been passed down from the ancestors of Qin's mansion. When she first saw it, she didn't think it was familiar. But now that she looked at it carefully, she found it somewhat familiar. He picked up one of the bracelets and caressed the ruby on it. Zhuozhuo, you also saw that a small piece of it is missing, right? I accidentally knocked it when I was young, and then I kept this pair of bracelets. Originally, I planned to give it to your father as a betrothal gift when he got married, but later it was gone. Madame Dowager sighed and said. Qin Wanru looked at the bracelets in her hand in surprise. If Madame Dowager didn't say it, she really didn't know that there was a small dent on the place where she pressed her hand. She sensed that a small piece was missing there, but it couldn't be seen at first glance. How could she find this small dent so easily? Grandma, what does Madame of Duke Xing mean? Biting her lip, Qin Wanru suppressed the huge waves rolling in her heart and led the topic. She had known that the memory of her last life was incomplete. It seemed that she couldn't remember some key things, so it was possible that she had seen this pair of bracelets in front of her in her last life. But in her last life, it should not be this pair of bracelets that returned to her grandma's hand. She didn't know where she saw this pair of bracelets in her last life, and it was vaguely familiar. You are going to attend the banquet, and it happens that a niece of Duke Xing's mansion also wants to attend the banquet in the name of Madame of Duke Xing. But there is no other miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the palace, so she wants you to take care of her. Speaking of this, Madame Dowager became embarrassed and hesitantly looked at Qin Wanru. There is no other miss of Duke Xing's mansion to attend the banquet? What about the miss of their mansion? Qin Wanru's attention fell on this condition of taking care of her. First miss is not in the capital city, second miss is ill, third miss fell down a few days ago, and fourth miss has to take care of her sister, so they can't go. Madame Dowager said. Duke Xing's mansion has a great influence in the capital city. Even if their niece is a nobody, it is still possible to ask someone to take care of her. Why do they ask me? Qin Wanru's eyes were a little deep, and there was a dark light in her eyes. Madame of Duke Xing was not Magistrate Qi of Jiangzhou, who only knew her family in the capital city, so she sent Qi Rongji to her family for foster care. Madame of Duke Xing's old maid also explained this matter. She said that this Mrs. Identity is not very prominent. Although she was also a dignitary from an aristocratic family in the past, she is now declining, so she is very afraid to be with the misses of big aristocratic families, for fear of being ridiculed by them. It happens that you are going to the palace, so she asked you to take care of her. For this reason, she took this pair of bracelets as a thank you gift. Madame Dowager's eyes fell on the bracelets. Thinking that the pair of bracelets in her family was finally sent by someone else, she felt sad for a moment. This sounded reasonable. Although Duke Xing's mansion itself was powerful, this cousin miss sounded like a girl from a declining small aristocratic family. Facing such a miss from a big aristocratic family, she must feel inferior, so it was reasonable that she was unwilling to go out with such a miss from a big aristocratic family. But the gift of this pair of bracelets was too heavy. It was not difficult to ask Qin Wanru to take care of her. They could go together, so there was no need to spend so much effort to send such a heavy gift. Grandma, does Madame of Duke Xing have other requests? Qin Wanru turned her eyes slightly and said, This? In fact, it is a little difficult. Zhuozhuo is unwilling, forget it. At most, you can give this pair of bracelets back to Madame of Duke Xing. Madame Dowager sighed in embarrassment and looked a little depressed. Grandma, tell me. Maybe it is not difficult. Qin Wanru reached out and shook Madame Dowager's hand and said, Looking at Madame Dowager's look, she knew that this pair of bracelets was attractive to Madame Dowager, not only because of its value, but also because of the things passed down by her ancestors. Madame Dowager felt sorry for the ancestors of the Qin family because she had lost this ancestral bracelet. Madame Dowager naturally hoped that she could get this pair of bracelets back. Madame of Duxing's gift really touched Madame Dowager's heart, so that Madame Dowager could not refuse it even if she wanted to. I just want you to introduce this cousin Miss to and great elder princess, Madame Dowager said helplessly. She was really reluctant to give up this pair of bracelets. Introduce her to and great elder princess? Qin Wanru thought of something. Yes, under the introduction, if and great elder princess really doesn't like this miss, it has nothing to do with you, Madame Dowager said. Then, this gift is still too much. Qin Wanru remained calm and continued to ask with a smile. Part of this gift is to apologize to you. The old maid of Duxing's mansion said that when Madame of Duxing came that day, Countess Yong asked her to visit Madame D and Yuru. The map was sent by Countess Yong, and Madame D asked someone to take out a letter. She also thought it was a letter from home, but she didn't expect that there were other twists and turns in it. For this, she has reprimanded Countess Yong, but she is still humble to you. Taking this opportunity to ask you for help, she sent the bracelets here, which is also an apology to express her sincerity. Madame Dowager explained. It was not only a gift of thanks, but also an apology. If it was just a gift of thanks, it was too much. But if it was an apology, it was possible that the apology was a little heavy because she felt guilty. What was more, Madame of Duxing was so considerate that she specially found the pair of ancestral bracelets of Qin's mansion, which showed her great sincerity. Although they didn't talk about what happened that day, it meant that Duxing's mansion did something wrong. At present, Madame of Duxing didn't come herself, but sent her personal old maid to apologize and send the gift, and found a reason to get closer to the relationship between the two families, which was understandable. Everything made sense and was perfect. However, Qin Wanru didn't believe in such a perfect plan. Madame Dowager might think that what Madame of Duxing did was reasonable, but Qin Wanru had already known that this was another plot of Madame of Duxing. Madame of Duxing was really powerful. With just a few words and such a gift, Grandma immediately dispelled most of the doubts in her heart, and she also felt that Madame of Duxing was quite sincere. In front of Madame of Duxing, she really couldn't slack off at all. Connecting all the things, she could only see Madame of Duxing's sincerity. Even if she asked her to help, it was just a reasonable reason to send this pair of bracelets. She just helped casually and didn't care about it. Sneering in her heart, Qin Wanru didn't show it on her face. She reached out to put down the bracelets and sent them to the table in front of Madame Dowager. Grandma, since Madame of Duxing is so sincere, then you should accept it. Anyway, it is not difficult to take someone to see and great elder princess. Madame of Duxing entrusted this to me, which is also a gesture of goodwill to our mansion. I think so too, but I still feel a little uneasy. Madame Dowager looked at Qin Wanru, reached out to push her falling hair behind her ear, and looked serious. Zhuozhua, I don't know why I think Madame of Duxing's words can't be completely trusted. Be careful when you enter the palace. If this miss acts excessively, you don't have to care about her. Since we already know that this pair of bracelets is in Duxing's mansion, we can find another way to give it back. Madame Dowager was also shrewd. Although she lost her composure for a while when she saw this pair of bracelets, she also came to her senses at this time. With what had happened before, no matter how perfect Madame of Duxing's explanation was, she still felt a little untrustworthy. Chapter 281. Madam, does anyone know about this? Countess Yong looked at Madame of Duxing in front of her in horror, and her fingers holding the teacup trembled. How could anyone know about this? Madame of Duxing said leisurely. She stretched out her fingers like an orchid, picked up the teacup on the table, took a sip, and then put it down leisurely. If you really dare not, then forget it. Anyway, this is your mansion's business, and it has nothing to do with me. But there was no one else in the room. Countess Yong's face was a little pale, and she was thinking about whether it could be done or not. Forget it. Don't mention it. This kind of thing is a bit immoral. Your Duke Yong's mansion is not an aristocratic family that is going to decline. You still have a future, and you have to accumulate virtue for your descendants. Your heir is not young anymore. When will he get married? Madame of Duke Xing asked with a faint smile. Her words shocked Countess Yong fiercely, and her face almost turned pale. If it was gone now, how could they talk about the future? Duke Yong's mansion looked beautiful on the surface, but in fact, it was empty. Now Di Yen, as the heir, not only had a bad reputation, but also married Qin Yuru, who had a bad reputation. It could be said that if there was no room for negotiation, Duke Yong's mansion would definitely decline in less than 100 years. If it was declining, how could they talk about descendants? Thinking of this, Countess Yong immediately gritted her teeth, raised her head and said, "Thank you for your advice, Madame of Duke Xing." Seeing that Countess Yong had agreed, Madame of Duke Xing smiled more and sighed with a gentle smile. In fact, I liked that girl before. She is good-looking, but she is too shrewd. She even wanted to use her curry favor with and Great Elder Princess, and even did not hesitate to trample on our mansion. Even if I can bear it, my old madam can't bear it. That bitch dared to trample on Duke Xing's mansion? Countess Yong said in astonishment. All aristocratic families in the capital city knew the resentment between Duke Xing's mansion and Great Elder Princess. They knew that if it weren't for Xiao Yuanhao, there would be a lawsuit between the two families. When he married Infanta Qinghua, the daughter of Ruian Great Elder Princess, the whole Duke Xing's mansion did not approve of it. But later, it was the emperor's decree, so Duke Xing's mansion had to accept it even if they did not want to. However, the whole Duke Xing's mansion did not agree with this. Although Infanta Qinghua had an extraordinary identity, Duke Xing's mansion was not an ordinary aristocratic family, and there were also people who were superior to her in terms of seniority, so it was said that she had always been depressed in Duke Xing's mansion. Later, heir of Duke Xing saw her like this and took her away from Duke Xing's mansion because he loved his wife dearly. The series of things that happened later could be said to have happened because she left Duke Xing's mansion. Therefore, in Ruian Great Elder Princess's heart, Duke Xing's mansion had killed her daughter, so she hated the people of Duke Xing's mansion to the core. As long as there was a chance, Ruian Great Elder Princess would definitely embarrass Duke Xing's mansion. In the face of the eldest princess of the royal family, Duke Xing's mansion could only retreat. No one dared to meddle in the affairs of these two families. Neither of them was easy to offend. Who knew when they would become cannon fodder? Duke Yong's mansion did not expect that Qin Wanru would meddle in it, so it sneered and said, "Stupid, so stupid. She is really stupid. Does she really think that Ruian Great Elder Princess is superior to Duke Xing's mansion?" Although Ruian Great Elder Princess was powerful, she was a woman with no children. Compared with Duke Xing's mansion, she was too delicate. If Ruian Great Elder Princess fell, how could the whole Great Elder Princess's mansion compete with Duke Xing's mansion? This was also an important reason for Countess Yong to mock Qin Wanru. In fact, she is not stupid. Duke Xing said meaningfully, "If there was no Ruian Great Elder Princess, how could the one in your mansion be suppressed by a co-wife? Isn't it because of the little power of Ruian Great Elder Princess? Bitch, it is she who is playing tricks." Countess Yong flew into a rage and slammed on the table with her hand so hard that the tea was poured out. "You don't have to be anxious. This girl is too smart. The face of our Duke Xing's mansion can't be trampled on by anyone," Madame of Duke Xing said calmly. It seemed that no matter when she looked at people, she looked very kind. Her eyes made people feel that she was dignified and kind, and she had the temperament of a famous lady. "Madame of Duke Xing, don't worry. This time, this bitch can't escape," Countess Yong said with a trace of disgust flashing in her eyes. When Lan came back, she also said that this bitch had gone too far. It was Lan who ordered the jewelry, but she rushed to pay for it first and took it first. As a result, Lan still had no suitable jewelry until now. She was still crying pitifully in the mansion. Thinking that her most beloved daughter was bullied like this, Countess Yong was so angry that her heart was about to explode. All the previous scruples also disappeared. As long as she got rid of that girl and pushed all the blame of Qin Yuru's previous troubles to this bitch, Qin Yuru's reputation would become better. As for her son, it would be much easier to prove his innocence. Now, both her son and her future daughter-in-law had a bad reputation. Even if she wanted to prove her innocence, she couldn't do it. What's more, the meaning in Madame of Duke Xing's words was also understood. She also understood that it was Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru, the two bitches, that made Qin Yuru and Madame D fall into such a disreputable situation. Without Qin Wanru, the little bitch, helping Shui Rulin secretly, Shui Rulin would not be able to make such a big wave. Now Shui Rulin had a baby in her belly. In any case, she couldn't give birth to the baby. If Duke Yong's mansion wanted to revitalize, it still had to rely on Qin Huaiyong's Ningyuan army general's mansion, which also needed Qin Huaiyong to rely on Duke Yong's mansion wholeheartedly. If Shui Rulin gave birth to the baby at this time, Qin Huaiyong would definitely be alienated from Duke Yong's mansion, which was also something that Countess Yong couldn't tolerate. Therefore, the key to all this was Qin Wanru. Seeing her in a daze, Madame of Duke Xing stretched out her slender fingers and shook them in front of her. It's not that I don't trust her. In fact, I do like this girl a little. Although she humiliated our Duke Xing's mansion, if I accept her as my adopted daughter, I believe she will still think that I am more useful than and great elder princess. What, madam, how could you? Countess Yong gasped and stood up hurriedly. She didn't want Qin Wanru to rely on Duke Xing's mansion. Don't worry, I just think so. The friendship between our mansions is also the friendship between the older generation. Compared with that servant girl, how can I not stand on your side? Madame of Duke Xing said with a smile. Her words came in and out, and it seemed that she had evil intentions towards Qin Wanru. But it seemed that she also had a sincere affection for Qin Wanru, so she trapped Countess Yong in it. Thank you, madam. I was worried that you would really accept her as your adopted daughter. Countess Yong breathed a sigh of relief and sat down. This girl is very shrewd. She liked me when she saw me before, and she even forced Madame Dowager to ask me to accept her as my adopted daughter. Fortunately, Qi Rongji, the daughter of Magistrate Qi, was also present at that time. So I could only take advantage of the situation to take the blame on her, so that you won't be embarrassed. Madame of Duke Xing said. Her words were so sincere that she almost confided in her heart. Countess Yong was both moved and excited when she heard it. She nodded hard at once and said, Madam, I will definitely tell our old madam about your kindness. Our two mansions are on good terms. There is no need to be so polite. The old madam of our mansion and the old madam of your mansion have a friendship. Of course, the two of us also have our own friendship. There is no need to get involved in the face of the older generation. Madame of Duke Xing smiled and gently pursed her lips with a handkerchief. She looked leisurely and peaceful. Good. Countess Yong said repeatedly and was overjoyed. Just now, she was really afraid that Madame of Duke Xing would like Qin Wanru. At this time, when she heard Madame of Duke Xing talk about accepting Qin Wanru as her adopted daughter, she despised Qin Wanru and felt a little proud. No matter how clever this bitch is, it will fall on Qi Rongji in the end, which will benefit Qi Rongji. If your daughter-in-law can successfully prove her innocence in the future, I can also accept her as my adopted daughter. After all, the Miss of Qi's mansion was actually forced at that time, and she didn't really like her. Madame of Duke Xing's next light words made Countess Yong unable to restrain her joy and bowed to Madame of Duke Xing. Madame of Duke Xing, I thank you on behalf of Yuru. If Qin Yuru could really become the daughter of Madame of Duke Xing, her background would be stronger, and her son would also get a lot of benefits. Even if he had a bad character, others would make way for him for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion. Of course, the power of Duke Xing's mansion couldn't be compared with that of Duke Yong's mansion. Hey, don't mention it. We used to be boudoir sisters. It's not a big deal. Madame of Duke Xing also stood up to help Countess Yong, but there was a trace of coldness in her eyes. This girl was an evil creature who didn't deserve to be born, and it would be best for her to die. If they had found this girl earlier, there wouldn't have been so many troubles. They were all useless servants. After looking for her for so many years, they actually let her live well under their eyes. On the day of the palace banquet, the weather was actually good. The winter sky became a sunny day, and the sun shone warmly. There was no wind, which was very comfortable. Qin Wanru wore a light pink smoky robe on the upper body, and a dress embroidered with colorful butterflies. There were not many colorful butterflies, but the embroidery was excellent and the layout was very ingenious. When she walked, each colorful butterfly seemed to be dancing, with different shapes and graceful postures. Coupled with a thin layer of gauze outside, she seemed to be more and more shrouded in fog. Inside, there was a long dress, and with the fluttering gauze skirt outside, the butterfly wings fluttered, looking far and near, fluttering like an immortal and flying away with the wind. On the light pink top, there were elaborately made toggle and loop buttons, which were also in the shape of butterflies, very delicate and chic, but different from the skirt style, but also harmonious. As for the belt around the waist, it was also covered with a layer of gauze, making the embroidery inside dreamlike. This dress was carefully made by Nanny Dong for Qin Wanru. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.